Good morning and welcome to our Committee of the Whole. Apologize for a little bit of a delay. We had some traffic issues and wanted to wait to make sure that the person introducing our first item was here. But before we begin, I need a motion to adopt the consent calendar, please.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And the motion carries. I will now turn over the instruction portion of our agenda to Ms. Morrison Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We will first have item 2.01, appearance of visitors, and I will ask that, I don't think we have any visitors, do we?
Not today.
We have no speakers. So we will continue to item 2.02, overview of environmental education program. I see Mr. McCoy at the microphone, and okay, and Dr. Royster, do you have any comments before he starts?
Yes, ma'am. Just briefly, this is a presentation regarding the environmental education programs within our district. Presented by request of Mrs. Roletter, and she has several questions she would like for us to answer. She may wish to say something at the outset, then Mr. McCoy will share with you the answers to her questions, along with an overview of the environmental programs that we have currently underway within the district and in partnership with others in the community. Thank you.
Oh, is that my cue? My machine's just logging in. I'm sorry. There was a wreck on 85, and then in all the hassle, coffee spilled all over my Chromebook, so that's not a good thing either. It's getting there. As an introductory remark, this item has been on my mind for quite some time. I have thought about putting forth questions about our environmental education program for various reasons, but most recently because I want to make sure that no matter what parents are telling children about climate change and global warming, even though apparently there are some leaders at the top who don't believe in that it is a real thing and that we need to be concerned and we need to address it in the scientific way so that children will know the facts. That was kind of the bud of my inspiration for bringing this item forward. And then as I started doing research, I found more and more information that led me to questions, which led to this item. And I also know that we have partners in our school system who help us tremendously in teaching these concepts. Is Mr. Weeks here? Did Mr. Weeks come?
He is coming. I don't know that he's arrived yet.
Okay. But I wanted to get the facts out there and drill down and see exactly how we are addressing this issue. I have lots of questions as the meeting progresses, but that will suffice for just an introduction, and I'm glad to see my dear friend Dave Hargett here, Dr. Dave Hargett. His wife is a good friend of mine, and he is here to speak to Lake Conisty, which is a very valuable resource we have for environmental education that a lot of people don't know about. And he's going to enlighten us, or Mr. McCoy is going to enlighten us on Lake Conisty, and I'm sure Mr. Hargett will have relevant answers to questions that you may have about Lake Conisty in the meantime. But that's all I have to say for introductory remarks. It wasn't everything I had written on this, but it'll do for right now. So take it away, Mr. McCoy. Thank you.
Okay. Well, as Dr. Royster and Ms. Roletter mentioned, we do have obviously Michael Weeks from Oak Mountain Science Center. Has a heavy role in the environmental science education that we do in Greenville County Schools. Also, I don't believe Chris Burris and Jessica Morton are our other two science specialists. I have half my staff are out with the flu right now, so I have various people not here. that are still sick, so we're struggling a little bit in the academics department. But both of them were planning on being here, that are not here today. So I will do my best to answer those questions you may have about specifically the environmental science as it pertains to the standards in the state. So just as kind of an overview, I know this is a little bit hard to see. This is not an inclusive list of all the state standards that deal with environmental education. This was some of the ones that we pulled from each grade level that are tied to basically the units that we have, that we would have had in Rubicon Atlas system. As you know, that's our curriculum management system. So these are the units we have that teachers use and teach in the classroom for science in grades, as you can see, kindergarten all the way up to earth science. You can see those standards for the most part build. In those standard letters mean something as far as strands and building, but really we start really with basic organisms in kindergarten, moving all the way up into climate change in earth science and what our impact is on the environment and climate change. So again, if you would want a full list of the state standards, fourth grade is probably the biggest carrier of those environmental science standards. Each grade level has varying anywhere from 4 main strands to, I think fourth grade has 8 or 9 main strands that really talk about environmental science. But these are the ones that really tie to specific units we've got on environmental science in our system. So just as an overview, we provide, and I will be diving into most of these items in detail in the presentation, so I won't spend a lot of time on these next couple of slides. The couple ones that will not go into necessary detail that have slides necessarily is the Greenville Zoo is a big partner of ours, has been for some time, also does a lot with environmental science with us, does some projects with us, some project-based learning with us, and also is very involved in the virtual field trips. My virtual field trip coordinator is heavily involved in working there at the zoo, getting them up and running with virtual field trips they deliver then to our students. We will talk about Roper Mountain and Lake Conisty and sanitation and Rewa. We'll talk about Muddy Sneakers in a little bit more detail, as well as City of Greenville and DHEC. Clemson University, particularly through their extension services, has been a big partner of ours for the last several years, actually. And so they have been a huge resource, particularly in those schools that really do focus on maybe science as far as their STEM focus there. Furman University we'll talk about in relationship to what they're doing right now with the Shy Institute with the Roper Mountain Science Center. And then Trees Greenville, I mentioned, you may have seen plaques with them around the schools. They do help our school gardens. Not every school has a garden, but the ones that do, they are heavy involved in planting trees and also providing a curriculum to teachers that really talks about that renewal piece. So starting off with our Science Center, Roper Mountain Science Center, you all are very familiar with Roper Mountain, but today we're going to focus more on the environmental science aspect of Roper Mountain Science Center, what they do in the realm of environmental science. So those standards, as I mentioned on that first page that we talked about, they have over 20 different earth and life science lessons that really focus on empathy for the world around them in our students. We'll talk about some detailed lessons in particular when we go through this presentation. But the big focus on Roper Mountain Science Center the last 3 or 4 years, as you all have been through that whole strategic plan shift with Roper Mountain Science Center, was really making those lessons much more hands-on to kids. So it wasn't a come in, sit, and get, but really utilizing the resources on the mountain to get the kids involved and hands-on and touching and really experiencing, if you will, environment. And so we have all, as you know, the environments. You are familiar with the environments we have at the Roper Mountain Science Center, the rainforest, the marine lab, the butterfly garden, the pond. And if you've been up there observing that, you know that's a very experiential piece for students. They get to sample pond water, and they go and analyze the contents of pond water, and they get to really go into each, they go this summer, they get to experience butterflies up close and personal through some of that experiential things in the summertime. They can obviously go into the butterfly garden at any time the butterflies are there and experience the stages of the butterfly from start to finish. So, and the lessons are focused really grades 2. We have lessons for grades 2 through 7. We focus heavily on 3 through 7, but we have lessons all the way down to 2nd grade. And on the, as you know, 60,000 plus students go to Roper Mountain Science Center a year. 20,000 of those students go through specific programs for environmental science based on their choice and grade level. And so, as we talked about probably several months ago, the Roper Mountain Science Center Planetarium kind of had a renovation. new projectors put in place. If you haven't seen it, I've been up there to see a show. It's a really incredible experience up there with a new projector system. They had 2 shows, though, that we procured that actually focused specifically on environmental science, and those are the 2 there listed on the right-hand side, Dynamic Earth and Habitat Earth. And so those are 2 that shows that, again, middle schools, if they choose, the teachers choose, can go through those 2 programs. You can see the topics that those cover there with food webs, environmental stewardship, how do we take care of our environment, and the human impact of how do our actions impact the environment around us. And they also have, and those are 2 of the shows. We have many more shows than that, but those are the 2 that really focus on the environment side. We also, if you haven't seen this lab, this is kind of an interesting lab to see. It's very hands-on. The kids are very excited about it. It's called the Power to Survive Lab. It's in one of the new labs we built at Broken Mountain Science Center. The kids are always very engaged in it. It's always a very loud place. It's a little chaotic in that lab because the kids are very engaged. It's a problem-based kind of situation where they have to come up with an energy solution for an impending energy crisis. And typically those energy solutions are clean power, whether it be solar, wind. And so they've got a variety of tasks they go through and experiment and hypothesize and try to build basically a clean energy source. I mentioned this with the zoo already, but we also have a high virtual impact at Broken Mountain Science Center as well. We implemented about 4 or 5 years ago. Broken Mountain has built, actually a little longer than that, since 2009, I guess. They have built multiple field trips that we deliver not only in-house, but we also actually deliver those out of county as well. And out of county, of course, pay for those. In county, they don't pay to visit the Broken Mountain Science Center or to do the field trips, the virtual ones. But this is another way to do an extension. If a grade level can't come more than once to Broken Mountain Science Center, this is a way for us to reach out to them. It could be a follow-up from a visit they did at Broken Mountain already, or it could be a new experience. Again, if you haven't seen this, they do it not only in science but also social studies. If you haven't seen it, it's a very, again, hands-on piece. The social studies one really goes through kind of the colony era, and the kids are using lemon juice for secret messages, and they learn about history through all that. And so it's a very hands-on field trip that they do. Their content for that has been recognized by the Center for Interactive Learning and Collaboration multiple years, as you can see there, for their content. And so that is expanding every year. More and more people outside the district want to take part in those field trips, and our schools obviously take part very heavily in these field trips each year. You can see the ones on environment particularly are habitats, animals, and weather are the ones we heavily focus on in the environmental science piece. We've talked about this as well before. The new sustainability building will be completed in 2020 at Broken Mountain Science Center. Currently, the new and expanded science lessons are being developed. We're doing that in connection with the Shy Institute at Furman University, not just for Broken Mountain and Greenville, but actually those lessons will be shared nationally across once we finish that collaborative partnership with them. And hopefully the idea would be that once we share those nationally, people will improve upon those, and we will be able to reap the benefits of that as well long-term going forward. And so moving in then to Lake Conisty, both of these experiences for our students, we have a very unique opportunity in Broken Mountain, Lake Conisty. I didn't mention Paris Mountain. All these nature habitats that we have that really allow our students to immerse in experiential hands-on nature activities and environmental science activities. Broken Mountain and Lake Conisty are going to be focused much more heavily on providing more educational things around for students. Paris Mountain, our kids are involved in heavily, but there's not as much we're not as organized there, but we do send thousands and thousands of children to Paris Mountain as well. Lake Conisty does a great job with really educating students in those same kind of different hands-on activities than Broken Mountain Science Center. We're a little more confined to Broken Mountain Science Center. We don't have nearly the acreage that they have, and we don't nearly have some of those environments that they have at Lake Conisty, which really gives our students some very unique perspectives. And so just talking about some of those unique things that Lake Conisty offers that for our students that have been able to take part in. Just as a little bit of background, they are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. They are also on the Register of Historical Places, which makes them a little bit unique in that regard as well. They serve a pretty impressive amount of people each year. The 500,000 people within a 30-minute drive, I think is something, again, that's not just students, obviously, but community members at large. And then over 100,000 visitors per year, which is impressive for them to serve that many people. 2,500 of our school children engage in those lessons and in the nature education program at Conisty each year, including 53 public, private, and homeschool groups served. Our students have taken part for many years in Lake Conisty as a place both in organized field trips and teacher-led field trips over there. And so some of the experiential learning, again, and we keep emphasizing the experiential learning because we want our students to be engaged in the nature and engaged in environmental science, particularly our students who may not have that background. And some of our students, whether it be in our Title I schools or more in our city schools, that may not have as much access to some of the unique opportunities like Conisty can offer. This is critically important for them. The nature education program started in 2013 at Conisty. Again, an impressive classroom, if you will, outdoor classroom, I think, Conisty. It's a 400-plus acre outdoor classroom with very, very different types of environments that the students can learn from that we'll talk about. The largest contiguous area of forest and wetlands in the Upper Reedy River Basin, 12-plus miles of recreational trails, which, again, over half are handicap accessible, which is important to some of our students that have those disabilities. And then 40 learning stations, which is, I think, unique, again, to Conisty, where if they want to do self-guided content on the tours, they can do that as well. I think having access to a place like this for our students, if you've been in our schools at all, you know the Reedy River is a big topic all the time in our schools. They're always doing projects around the Reedy River, and so this connects very nicely to what the work Conisty is doing. Continuing that experiential learning piece, it is protected by the conservation easement and wildlife sanctuary status. Important bird area of global significance. And I will say again, for our students who sometimes don't get to experience those types of things, maybe because of where they live and what area of town they live in, this is a unique experience for them to see things that they may not get to see at home and not have all that background information sometimes about the environment. 207 different bird species that our students get to see, probably not all at one time, but have the opportunity to see when they're out there. And really the poster child for watershed-derived Brownsfield conditions. I think that's one of the things that when we were researching Conisty specifically is very unique to Conisty, and our students having the ability to experience that as one of those unique classroom learning environments that really you can't really see anywhere, at least close to us, where they can drive to. That's right here, if you will, in our backyard. And then it's also the rain garden for a 64 square mile Reedy River watershed upstream. We talked about the Reedy River a little bit already, including the old industrial Greenville, which does provide that valuable ecosystem services to the county. There's a lot of project opportunity that we've been involved in with the Reedy River, specifically around our students doing projects there, if you will, inquiry-based projects there. So again, this whole system that works together is very important for our students in seeing how the environment works and our human impact specifically on that environment. We'll talk about some projects a little bit later that the students have been involved in that really analyzes how their choices impact our environment. So the standards-based lessons at Conisty, if you look at those, you can see some of the hands-on pieces of those lessons. I kind of put them out there by grade level. So you can kind of see the titles there up at the top, and then what the students will do in each of those lessons. So from 4K, really, all the way to middle high. One of the really neat things that Conisty does offer is, if you'll remember in our Roper Mountain Science Center, when we redid the Science Center, we really focused on that grades 2 or grades 3 up. And so Conisty does provide another good, great service for our 4K, 5K, first grade, and second grade, and obviously the other grades too, but where we may not have as much of a strong content for our younger grades, Conisty certainly can fill the gap in that for us, and we encourage that from our schools when they're looking for something specifically in the young grades that we may not be able to serve there. And so some of our learning opportunities for them, again, just the opportunities unique for our students is they've got Saturday programs on the topics, as you can see there: nature watching, arts, nature journalism, history. Again, some of those topics instill in the love of nature in children, love of environment in children. 24 Saturday birding programs in conjunction with Greenville County Bird Club, so a great partnership there for our students or community. Frog Watch citizen science programs that are available from February to October with a partnership from the Greenville County Zoo. And summer camps, which our kids have participated in for several years at Conisty, some of our students participating in those summer camps for our elementary and middle school students. And then learning opportunities for some students and higher education, even going into the higher education realm. Special classes on the Brownsfield for high school students. Again, a great opportunity for our high school students to participate in that. And I think a lot of great project opportunities there that our teachers can really connect to the classroom and then go and see it in real life where it's not as hypothetical anymore. Special education tours for college and university groups. Volunteer service days in conjunction with the industry college environmental groups. And then they also host graduate and senior thesis programs and from multiple universities in multiple topics. That green's a little hard to see down there, but on multiple topics and at the bottom there that you can see, all relating to the environmental science piece. And so what our teachers say on there, and I just pulled a couple of the quotes from the material they gave us that were specific to our schools there. Both of the teachers from Brushy Creek and Chandler Creek really talking about how well the lessons that they did with their kids align to the state standards, which is critical important for us, obviously. If we are sending our kids out for a day in a field trip, we want to make sure that the standards are aligned. It's not just a free day, if you will. We want the kids to have fun, and we want science to be fun for them, but we also want them to be learning and tied to the standards ultimately as well, because that's what we're accountable to. So those lessons from both those teachers comment about the strong standard alignment there. We also have a couple of our schools going through Muddy Sneakers program. That is also a 501(c) nonprofit organization. They also provide the experiential learning. Now, this is focused right now on grades, just 5th grade. But again, that experiential piece is very important to us. And they really focus on that, creating a lifelong love of nature. Again, which we want to instill in all of our students. We want them to understand the deep impact of environment and climate and all that, but really we want them to love nature and really find a love for that, the outdoors piece. And then the programmatic goals of Muddy Sneakers. The students who enroll in this program, or the schools who enroll their 5th graders in this program, they do 6 to 10 days over the course of the academic year. Some of that actually can be done on school campuses. The unique thing about this with Muddy Sneakers is they don't necessarily go to the same place. They find the places around the school that the kids can go to experience the curriculum goals that they're trying to teach through the lessons. They have a strong commitment with the teachers, so it truly is a partnership with the teachers. So again, hopefully it's not a one-and-done field trip. Those times it's that connection that teacher can make and draw background knowledge. Remember when we were out there and we did this, or remember we saw this. So hopefully those teachers are also learning. That's one of the comments from some of the teachers early on, was that they learned as much about science and environmental science they felt like in some cases their kids did. And we know overall, we know that science tends to be one of those areas that for elementary teachers it's the weakest. That's the one they struggle with a lot of times. And so anytime they can be learning alongside the kids more deeper in learning, then we are always very pleased with that. And they do have a small group focus, so it's about 12 kids per instructor, keeping those things, the class size, if you will, small, so that they can do, again, more of that hands-on experiential learning. The participating schools, Augusta Circle has participated in the past years, I should say. This year, Slater, Marietta, and Alexander are our 2 schools that are participating and going through the Muddy Sneakers program. The Greater Greenville Waste Lab, this was kind of an exciting project that we did, our teachers did, I should say, with that. If you can see the bus in the little corner there, you've probably seen the bus driving around Greenville. It does go to our schools at request. We've had it at Summer Academy. We park it outside of the Summer Academy each year so that our teachers can go through the waste lab and kind of see what the experience is so they can bring it to their school. It was developed in conjunction with our Greenville County teachers, which makes us a little bit unique. As I said, they can request it, and it really focuses, if you've been through it, it provides real-life opportunities for students to engage in activities about sustaining our environment. So there's some recycling activities in there. I've been through it twice, I think it is. I don't remember all the activities I did in there, but they were all focused around recycling and sustainability. And so that's something they keep kind of fresh for the teachers, and how the teachers help develop that. Again, how do we protect our environment is really what they focus on. And then they have each year now, I think last year was the first year, but they do a viral video contest that they put out there that the students can enroll in. They can create a viral video about typically it's going to be a topic related to solid waste and particularly sustainability. And so this past year, the 16-17 winner was Vivian Schmatzer, I think I'm saying that name correctly, was the winner from J.L. Mann High School Academy, and she did hers on sustainability and how we recycle. Instead of throwing clothes away, instead of throwing things away, how we can recycle those things versus filling our landfills up. And so they will do that again. I believe that contest is about to start again, and it is focused on grades 9 through 12, so the high school level instead of the younger levels. REWA we've got several partnerships with REWA. The one that's most standing out probably is the Watershed Challenge that we do. This past year, in 2017, Fisher Middle School, a team from Fisher Middle School won the REWA Watershed Challenge, and that topic was responsible management of pet waste. And so that was, each year they have a topic, and the students build a project around that particular topic. And so this year it was Fisher Middle School that won, a team from Fisher Middle School that won that challenge. The Greenville Conservation Soil and Water Conservation District, they also provide some opportunities for our students to engage through a themed essay. 75th anniversary this year, which is fairly impressive, so it's a fairly long-standing activity. They also do annual environmentally themed photo contests. So for students who may not, writing essays may not be their thing, they may be more into photo areas or arts, if you will, they can enter that contest, and they do award 5 $250 environmental mini grants per year for that. They offer free classes to students after school, before school. And they also offer free teacher training, which many of our teachers have participated in with Project WET, which is water education for teachers, through a Duke Energy grant. Duke has also been a big partner of ours providing financial resources, which has been much appreciated, and a lot of that in the way of grants that our teachers have been able to get further education in environmental science. The Green Steps mentorships we have as well. Oakview, I just put them up there as one of our schools, but they in 2016 and 2013 won the DHEC Rising Star Award for Recycling, and in 2013, the SC Green Steps School of the Year Award. You may have seen, again, some signs for this in our schools. It is an environmental education and action initiative that recognizes schools that really have a more of a sustained steps toward becoming environmentally responsible. So it's not really a one-and-done type thing. It's really more how are you sustaining annually. And the biggest one that I can think of is I see in schools a lot is the recycling piece, and you'll see a lot of kids picking up the recycling at the end of the day or whatever it happens to be that their focus is. You can see the 3 areas there is on conserve, protect, and restore, and there's a pretty broad spectrum of what schools could focus on. It can be the signs, the efforts in the schools for parents not to leave their cars running for 45 minutes when they're in the car line. The Save Our, you've seen those signs about Save Our Air and those things. So students will take on some campaigns like that to become more environmentally responsible. Some of the current projects, you can see up there recycling programs. We've got many school gardens. They teach students how to raise school gardens. Environmental protection. We've got schoolyard habitats. We've got several with nature trails. We've got several schools doing composting, teaching children how to compost. And so, again, reducing our footprint there. And then water conservation. How do you conserve water overall? And hopefully these things carry over into home life. I know some of the recycling things, I do not remember last year what school it was, but some of the parents were saying, the kids coming home about how do we recycle and why aren't we recycling? And so even if that goes back to the parents, and it makes parents think a little bit more how we can save the environment as well. The certified Green Step schools we have are Oakview, Slater, and Taylor's. And so, again, if you go to those schools in particular, you'll see some very focused efforts on energy and conservation. And then finally, the digital resources. So we have a lot of digital resources in Greenville County that focus on environmental science. I just put the 2 up here that are most common. The digital education, discovery education rather, tech book. Focuses heavily on environmental science because it's tied to our standards. And if you'll recall, each year we also pay for streaming services with Discovery Education, and those are heavily focused, many of those topics, on environmental science as well. And in Gizmos, if you haven't seen Gizmos, Gizmos is a virtual lab. There's a lot of lab experiments that can be done through Gizmos. The one I remember most frequently that I've seen in schools is on erosion. It's hard to see erosion sometimes out happening in the community sometimes, and so there's time lapse, and they can move scales and all that to see what happens when the water, the earth erodes, and how that impacts things downstream or how that impacts communities. And so some of those things can speed up some, if you will, some sometimes abstract concepts for our students. And so the Gizmos piece is also something critical that our students use. Discovery Education was with us yesterday and informed us that we are one of the top users in the country of those Discovery science education streaming resources. This year alone, we'll exceed over 3 million artifacts accessed by our teachers and students. So our students are accessing the content and doing some of those projects as well. And I think now we're open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. You got these people so excited up here. We are fighting over who will ask questions first. So Mr. Sellers asked to have the first question, but I'll let him decide if he wants Ms. Roletta to have the first question.
I should have let her go first.
Ms. Roletta?
Thank you. Okay, what I'm going to say to you, Jeff, is wow. You did exactly what I asked. You answered questions that I wanted answered and gave me more information than I even asked for. So thank you. That doesn't mean I don't have more questions, of course. First of all, I don't know if this is kosher or not, but how many of you on the board, my colleagues, how many of you have ever heard of Lake Conisty, just heard of it? Okay. How many of you have been there? That is wonderful, wonderful. It's kind of a hidden gem right in the middle of our county. And if you've not taken children there, that's the next thing you ought to do. I have a few questions, some about this and some branching out into other environmental questions. But first of all, the standards that we have that obviously Lake Conisty is following and there's a close alignment. They've put a lot of work into that. It looks like Conisty is trying to be a natural extension of what the school district does. It's not. It doesn't look like it's in competition with Roper Mountain Science Center at all. It just looks like a great place that we probably ought to utilize more. We ought to encourage our teachers to take them more. Do you know how much it costs to, I know there's a minimal cost, it's not very much, because they try to just operate on a shoestring and, you know, they have their own land here. Do you know what the cost is for a class field trip?
I don't remember the cost of the class field trip. I'd have to get that information for you.
Would Dr.
$8
Would Dr. Hargett know?
I'm sure he would.
Can he come up there?
That's up to the...
Burke, is it all right if Dr. Hargett comes up to answer some questions?
I'll defer to Ms. Morrison Fair. It's all right with me, but
Ms. Morrison Fair,
she
can
is
Dr.
the chair
Hargett,
for this
who runs,
section.
Okay. Please come to the lectern up here. Can you tell me, Dr. Hargett, how much it costs to send a class to Lake Conisty?
I can give you, thank you for the question, and thank you, Jeff, excellent job in capturing all these environmental programs because they all work together.
Yes.
We charge $8 per student for schools for field trips that's a one-day, one-child cost, $5 per child for Title I schools. Let me point out my Director of Education, Sarah Whitmire, is right here.
Hi, Sarah.
She's formerly a JL Man teacher, several years there, and been with us a couple of years. So the answer is about $8 per student per
minimal.
day. Well, the truth is we don't come close to breaking even on that. We do receive a stipend, I will call it, from Greenville County Rec, so that we're sort of part of their portfolio of parks. But you know, we still own the land, we still care for the land, we still run the park, we still have regulatory requirements that we have to satisfy. So we have to control that space. But a lot of our stipend from the county goes to subsidize our education program. So that is vital. We'd like to have more. We'd like to have more sponsorship for more partners, and we're getting there. I mean, our park has only been open 11 years. The foundation's been open since 2001. And we've really been in the education business since 2001. In fact, Nancy Fitzer on your staff was our very first employee back then, helping win and run
news tidbit.
an EPA environmental education grant way back then for high schools, and that involved all of the high schools of the county. So I've more than answered that particular question.
Thank you. Do you know if, you may not even know, but do you know how these schools pay for just the small amount that you charge? Do they, or maybe Jeff would know, how these various schools that come, it's probably a myriad of ways, but are the children charged is what I want to know, or does the teacher raise money? Or
That would vary by school. I would say in our Title I schools, typically, they'll find other ways to pay for that for their students. We can't usually do that through Title I funds with field trips. They haven't really loosened those regulations up yet for us to do that, but it would vary from school to school as far as whether they charge the students or not.
I suppose it would be possible for students to get scholarships if they can't afford that kind of thing.
Yes,
Is that
and
done?
absolutely. I will say in most cases I know of, they make sure, the teachers of schools, a lot of the PTAs make sure that if there's students who can't afford to go on a field trip, they chip in and pay that difference.
PTAs are a great resource.
Yes.
Thank you. That took care of that question. As far as the standards go, the state standards, they're up there for environmental science. Have our teachers or have you found any areas where, I don't know how, standards maybe, more specific standards or different standards were missing? I know you could probably throw an idea under anything up there, but have we had any problems with teachers wanting to explore areas under environmental ed, that's the big umbrella, under EE, that teachers have not been able to match to standards?
I wouldn't say necessarily that they've not been able to find a standard that some of these standards are very broad, particularly in the environmental science arena. And this is not exclusive. I did not list every standard because it would have been 3 or 4 slides to list every one that's tied to environmental science.
Right.
I would say that the teachers, if we're going to go on a day field trip to Conisty or to Paris Mountain or to Rogue Mountain, whatever that happens to be, there's going to be a strong alignment of standards. Every activity we do that day may not be tied to a standard, but there's going to be a large portion of that day is going to be tied to standards. And some of that's just honestly giving some kids some experiential background knowledge. That may not, some kids never been in a forest before, or been in a rainforest, Rogue Mountain Science. Well, most kids haven't been in a rainforest, but forest and some of those experiences. At Brownsfield, most of our kids would not have been able to experience that. So some of that's just really building their background knowledge for some of those things, which is just as important critically.
Thank you. All right, there was I had never heard of Muddy Sneakers before, and I started doing a little research on it, and it looks like a program that does what it's supposed to do. Is that company located in South Carolina? I know it's not in Greenville County.
It's a North Carolina-based company. Now they do work. I believe they have some folks here now in Greenville County, given that we have some schools that are going through the program.
But the company itself is based in North Carolina. Do they own their own land? It sounded like from what you were saying they took students places, but it's not like Conisty, where Conisty owns the land. You go there, and so it would be probably a lot less expensive.
So Muddy Sneakers uses typically the various places around the school that might be closest to that school that they can take the students to, then still give them a place that be close enough they can take them and get the same experiences they want to give to the students. And so they also focus heavily on, for example, some of the stuff they do is in the backyards of the schools, so they can kind of teach also students that doesn't have to be, you don't have to be in a particular place necessarily to do some of these things we're trying to teach and to learn about nature. You can do that in the backyard of your school. So they do a kind of a variety of both, parks around the school or areas around the school But
not anything they own. They don't own it.
If I might, just a second, Ms. Rhodes.
Yes.
I don't want to interrupt, but I wanted to clear something up. It's not that's not actually not a company, it's a nonprofit organization. I don't know who else might be here, but I know Mr. Harper's here that you all will know from Harper Construction, obviously locally, who is affiliated with Muddy Sneakers. And I don't know who else. Jeff may know who else is here.
We have a few folks here from Muddy Sneakers as well. Yes.
Thank you for joining our discussion here. Do they only serve students? It says essential learning for students in 5th grade, so that's it. It's 5th grade only. Is that correct?
5th grade at this point in time, unless things have changed. It's 5th grade, at least that we're focused on right now in our schools.
All right, Lake Coniston is all grades, or,
I mean, they have the ability to serve all grades.
and
yes.
Roper Mountain Science Center, of course, is all grades?
2 or 3 through, 8.
Yeah, okay. What is, compare apples to apples, what is the cost of attending Muddy Sneakers event as compared to like what we found out from Lake Coniston?
I would have to ask the representative from Muddy Sneakers to weigh in on that. I don't have those costs in front of me. So if you would like one of them to speak to that.
Do you know the cost of going to an event per student per day?
Sure. So Muddy Sneakers is a unique program in that you sign up for multiple days. And when we partner with the school, and currently we're partnering with 39 schools across North Carolina and South Carolina, and endorsed and supported by the state of North Carolina's legislature. So when we partner with the school, every school does 6 days. And all of the data that is out there on environmental education right now says the one-off is not an effective experience, that it is absolutely critical that they have a multi-day experience. And we don't we don't try to squeeze that into a single semester. It's spread out across the course of the year. The cost, to answer your question, is $5 a day for students if they stay on their schoolyard, and it's $10 a day if they go off-site. Those costs are very much influenced by the fact that we never have more than 12 students per one instructor, which for principals in Greenville County has been definitely a deciding factor on whether to participate or not. Oftentimes those numbers are closer to about 10 to 1, but that gives you an idea of the cost. And then you can multiply that out. A typical school year experience for us is 4 off-site and 2 on-site. So when you round out that number, that's $50 a student a year to be in Muddy Sneakers.
Okay, but tell me, the money that you get for this goes back to North Carolina. It does not stay in South Carolina, correct?
Not exactly. So we have 2 South Carolina, well, we have one of our South Carolina instructors here today. I would say that all of the funds that go to pay her time and salary, or her per day rate, would stay in South Carolina. Our intention right now is to open as soon as this fall an office, as we've already done in one location in North Carolina outside of our home base, here in Greenville County. I have a long history of working in this county. I have family in this county. I've worked for the Nature Conservancy previously, protecting lands in Greenville County. We have a deep knowledge of this area, and we also have board members from South Carolina, from Greenville County specifically. So 7 years ago when I was hired to come to this position, it was actually with the intention, one of the reasons I was hired was to open an office in South Carolina.
Thank you. Let me.
Ms. Roletta, can we come back to you and let some of the other members?
Oh, sure. That's you can come back to me. Let me
Thank
see
you.
if there's anything else that hooks to that. Okay, I'm good.
All right, Mr. Sellers?
Jeff, good presentation, and all the programs are very worthwhile in their own right. One question, why wasn't Paris Mountain included in this?
Paris Mountain, we do a lot with Paris Mountain, as I mentioned up front, but I did not include Paris Mountain. That was an oversight on our part.
Okay.
I'm sure there's many other programs that we could have included. We started off with a presentation that was probably about an hour and cut from there. So Paris Mountain, though, was an oversight initiative on our part.
I just know there's a number of, probably 20, 30-ish
There
that
is.
go up there. Okay.
There's a ton of kids that go up there for field trips, yes.
Ms. Roletter touched on part of my questions related to the cost per student. So from the information that's been presented so far, Lake Coniston runs somewhere between $150 and $200 for a classroom to go out there plus transportation. Muddy Sneakers runs, depending on the program, as much as $50 a student annually. And how much does Roper Mountain cost per student?
Well, Rope Mountain doesn't cost anything for our students.
Only thing they have to do is pay for the transportation?
Correct.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Thank you. This is my world. So what I do in my job with the City of Greenville is connected to environmental ed. So all the programs that Jeff talked about and the people that are in the room that have come, I'm going to recognize two more that are here. Stacy Flax with REWA. Stacy, if you'll raise your hand. And Brad with the City of Greenville, Parks and Rec. We are fortunate in Greenville County to have a number of great partners in the REWA, with REWA, Greenville Water System, with the city, that are actively at the table every day in our schools, helping to educate students in ways that connect to the curriculum and that connect to the standards, and then try to connect them to nature. And fortunately, we have a lot of sites where the students, there's enough space where they can have gardens and they can go right outside their school building and discover something with a little bit of help sometimes that they wouldn't have discovered otherwise. So I'm really proud of the interconnections. There's a significant amount of investment from nonprofits like Muddy Sneakers and Friends of the Reedy, and then organizations like REWA and Greenville Water System and the City of Greenville and Greenville County that all invest a significant amount of money and energy and resources in educating our students. And again, I think they've done a great job of leveraging all those resources together to kind of get to what we want for children, which is to be responsible citizens and to understand sustainability as it relates to protecting all our natural resources. I think the one thing that I hope that the Environmental Sustainability Center brings us at Roper Mountain is a way to bring that all together cohesively. It's really exciting to think about that work with Furman and developing those sustainability studies, because there is so much integration between the nature piece and the resource piece and the environmental stewardship and all the other parts of our curriculum. Furman is a big believer that sustainability can't just be about environmental ed. So I think the opportunity we have with that facility to use it not as a facility just to think about a facility we're bringing people to, but really to use it as a hub to connect all these different partners that we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, and leverage it as a hub to connect to Lake Conisty and connect to Paris Mountain and to all the other places and all the other ways that we can connect kids. So I really hope that we continue that effort as we develop that environmental program through the Roper Mountain building that really is building a program of environmental stewardship and sustainability. So thank you for all of you that are here and for the work you guys do every day. I know it's not easy. With the City of Greenville, we actually leverage our stormwater fee by giving schools a credit on their stormwater fee if they will do their own watershed education, because we figure there's nobody better than the people in the building to engage in that work. So in the city, we've had 13 schools that have taken that on this year and that are doing some fabulous things. So I'm very appreciative of this community that we live in. There are so many people that care. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Dr. O'Connor?
Yes, thank you. I also appreciate all the hard work that this represents on behalf of our students. And one comment, since we have the director of the South Carolina, chairman of the South Carolina Conservation Bank now, Mr. Harper, a quote from him: "I see a direct connection between our quality of life, economic development, science education, and the creation of a future generation of conservationists and stewards of our environment. They are all interrelated and critical to our future." And I think that's what this is about, and this is what is represented by the great work that the people who are here and our partners are doing. And from the programs that we've specifically delved into, I think we can all agree that the fees that have been named are comparable and very modest for the actual costs of what it would be to provide these opportunities for our students. And I just wanted to say that I'm not fortunate enough to have the Muddy Sneakers programs in any of my schools in the southern part of the county, and would love to see some of that moving our way, and also some of the ones that we talked about that are the 3 schools that are certified in, Jeff, if you can help me.
The Green Steps certification.
The Green Steps program.
Yep.
So, you know, move down there a little bit, come on down to Conisty, and then down below to Simpsonville and down to our elementary schools as well, because it's very exciting, and I've heard many great things about these programs over the years, and this is a good reminder for us to get more involved in trying to support and encourage and invite and welcome and embrace these partnerships. So thank you for bringing it forward, and to each and every one of you for being here and for what you do. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you all for this. I echo Ms. Wells's comments about the importance of hands-on experiential learning, and I really appreciate all the partners here who are doing that. You know, in my past life, I was an environmental ed instructor at Camp Greenville, and really enjoyed kind of seeing kids see nature for the first time and really be away from buildings for the first time. I assume that, I know you mentioned that this would have been an hour long. There were some off-site overnight visits like Camp Greenville and Barrier Island that weren't here. We're still doing those, correct? They just weren't on this presentation.
Correct. Correct. Schools, of course, that's a school-by-school decision on those. We didn't go as much into what schools do individually across necessarily. But yes, we still do have schools that do Camp Greenville. We still have schools that do Barrier Island. We've done Barrier Island actually for the summer reading camp in the past with our kids. So yes, still both great field trips.
The only question I had was, I know some of these we listed kind of how they align with our standards. Some of them I assume they do, we just didn't discuss it. Is there guidance that's given from the district to principals about kind of how to take into account how they align with our standards as a way to prioritize which of these activities would be a best fit for their school? How is that?
Yeah, I mean, we again, it's a little autonomous in the schools as far as field trips go. Now, the guidance from our department, from academics, would be that when you're doing a field trip, you need to make sure it's aligning to standards, because we do want our students to be, learning while they're in various places, whether that be science, social studies, math, or English focused places. But yeah, so we usually in field trips, typically, they would have a field trip, either the request form that they fill out for the school that they've created or a lesson plan. They typically would have some sort of alignment to standards to say, here's some activities we're going to do on this field trip that's aligned to these standards. Okay. So that absolutely they would. And what I would say is the majority of these things we talked about, while some are contests and different things, aligned to our standards. And I shouldn't forget to mention, a lot of our partners are sitting out here. A lot of the great work they do is with our teachers, which is critically important, because when I was in college, I didn't learn a whole lot about science. I had one class, and so everything else I learned, I had to learn on my own by reading in the classroom and all that. So to have the hands-on things that the instructors or the folks out here do, that have the deep knowledge of that, or Ms. Wells that has the deep knowledge of that, gives those teachers that background knowledge, I think, to make stronger connections to the classroom.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have one last speaker. I have 2 speakers, and I'd like to extend for 2 minutes. Ms. LaVentus Wells.
I think it's great that everyone in the nonprofit world contributes to our education for our children. It's very important that everybody brings something different to the table that benefits the characteristics of the tools for these children to learn and grow with, and then use as they become adults in helping their children and family members. I'm glad you mentioned Barrier Island, because my children still talk about that trip. They left their jeans, they left their shoes, they left everything. I wish I could say I was really appreciative that they did that, so I'll just leave it at that. But it was an experience that they will always remember, And it's something that they learned in our school district and in our schools that carry on for generations. And, you know, when it's so positive, and Dave, thank you, and thank you for your emails and your texts. I think I must be getting them every hour on the hour. I just looked, but anyway, thank you for the update on Muddy Sneakers. But, you know, Table Rock, going to all of these things. The thing that I love about the outdoors is I want Greenville to always be green and not pavement. I think it's so important that we remain Greenville and that we experience everything about green in our county. So, Jeff, thank you. Thank you, Roper Mountain Science Center, because goodness gracious, y'all are unbelievable. And thank you all for bringing these programs to our children. Thank you, Bert, for making sure that this happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Leventis-Wells, and you get to sum up, Mrs. Roletta.
Chuck's reminding me I have 2 minutes. Well, you might as well extend again. I've been working on this since September, so I still have some questions.
Hold on, Ms. Roletta. I think Mr. Southern down there has
okay.
He just
Mr.
just
Southern,
signed
go
on.
right ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
I just have one question, Jeff. How do we teach global warming?
Well, global warming, Mr. Seth, as a term is not in the standards. So what we would focus on back here in those standards, we would focus more on human impact on climate change. So the things we do as humans, how that impacts our environment by not recycling, by not those types of things, emissions.
Well, Mr. Roletter asked what resources does it use to teach environmental education, which includes global warming. And so I'm just wondering, how are we teaching global warming, and what are we teaching about global warming? And or are we?
And what I would say, Mr. Seth, is that right now, as far as that terminology, global warming being used, we're not teaching about specifically global warming because it's not in the standards. Now, as those used at times in science classes or history classes for debate and those types of things, certainly. But overall, what we focus on in climate change is how our human relationship to climate, how we impact climate change based on our choices.
Well, it appears that a lot of discussion about environmental education considers or draws from how we're protecting our environment. And I was just wondering what our school system is doing to focus on that, or to distinguish what's fact and what's fiction, or what schools have thought they are on it. So what you're telling me, Jeff, is that we really don't use the term global warming in our schools?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I doubt that that's...
Didn't make it.
That can't be true.
Without any objection, I'd like to extend for 1 minute. Mrs. Southern, have you completed?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
All right. Ms. Roletta?
1 minute's not going to do it, but I'll start. All right, let me go back to my notes. Jeff, in Greenville County, do we ever sponsor, I noticed we had writing contests from other outside sources that teachers can take advantage of. I know when I was teaching AP and Honors English, I always required my students to enter at least one contest a year. Every student had to enter one. They didn't have to win it, but they had to enter. And that was a good bang for their buck, because they got more, if they won, they got a lot of confidence in their writing, and a lot of them did win, but they got learning skills about the topic that they were assigned. You just said 1 minute. Give me 5 minutes.
Without any objection, I'd like to extend for 5 minutes. Okay.
not only did they have confidence if they won, that was always a rah-rah moment, and parents were so pleased, but they learned about the topic. No matter what it was, they learned about it. And a lot of them were concerned, a lot of those topics dealt with debatable issues on the environment. Additionally, they learned valuable research skills while they were doing this. So there was a lot of bang for the buck. Sure. And I didn't know, does Greenville County Schools put out any kind of writing contest to our high schools? I know we can't require students as a board to write an essay, but do we ever extend topics and say, and the environment's always right for writing, always. Do we ever do that?
Not as far as something that's sponsored by Greenville County. There's things like the PTSAs in the district sponsor writing contests, and of course, all the things we talked about earlier with the writing contests, and I didn't mention many more that I could have mentioned. Those we all do send out to the schools and encourage, of course, and some teachers still would. A high school, as a requirement, may require them to enter at least one contest that year. But as far as like a Greenville County or an academics department sponsoring an essay, we do not as a district.
That wouldn't be possible, would it? Or could we put a topic out there and say, here, do what you want to with it?
Yeah, it would just be difficult as far as you'd have to have just the personnel and time to go through entries and, whether things are awarded to that. It makes things a little more complicated sometimes versus allowing the organizations who do a really good job at doing that already, let them kind of sponsor that, and then they have to take the time to read the essays and actually award the sponsorships.
Yeah, I've been judges on those things too.
Right, be judges.
All right, thank you. Michael Weeks, Mr. Weeks. How does what we offer our students at Roper Mountain Science Center differ from what is offered at Lake Conisty? It's a natural extension. There may be some overlap, but I know there's some things different too. So how is that different from what we're doing at Lake Conisty?
I don't know everything that they do at Lake Conisty, for one. I can tell you what we do at Roper Mountain, what most of our experiences are for second graders through eighth graders and in environmental science, and that differs depending on the year. So for example, for second graders, they take advantage of the 60-acre campus through a nature walk with one of our educators that utilizes things like our pond and our gardens that we have on site, as well as the nature trails. In addition, they might have a lesson on weather or another similar topic. Different grades have different experiences, so something that the fifth graders do is to go out to our pond and take a sample and come back to the ecology lab for a 90-minute lab type experience. The second grade experience I mentioned was a 60-minute experience. And then we also have opportunities for middle schoolers, such as our sixth grade energy lab rotation, where they deal completely with renewable energy and solutions around energy. So we have a 60-minute lab which is focused on a design challenge around solar panels that they have to create and measure energy, and the same thing with wind turbines, where they have to actually create the energy using wind turbines, measure it, redesign their turbine design, and continue to learn about that, as well as electromagnets. In addition, we have, with our new 4K system in the planetarium, which many of you got to see when it reopened last year, we have been able to add curriculum beyond astronomy. So we have two acclaimed shows that we have added just in the last year, a sixth grade show called Dynamic Earth and a seventh grade show called Habitat Earth, which is all about ecosystems and connectivity. So we have a lot of different avenues at Roper Mountain that we're able to utilize for environmental science.
Thank you very much. I knew some of that, but some of it's good to be reminded. Thank you, Mr. Weeks.
You're welcome.
Very specifically, I have some questions about Conisty again. If you can answer them, fine. If not, Dr. Hargett's, welcome to come and answer. I don't know if you would know this stuff. How long has the Conisty Foundation and Lake Conisty Nature Park been providing educational services to our school district and our schools and others, and what grades are targeted?
Yeah, I'll have to defer that to Mr.
Thank you. We started in 2001 with our very first environmental education grant that we got from US EPA and that was focused on high schools at the time, and that was about a 2-year program, and so that wrapped up.
We're going to have to wrap this up, the discussion. So is that your last question, Ms. Roletta?
No.
It's not?
5 minutes.
Okay, we'll extend for our final 5 minutes. Thank you, Nancy.
The program offerings that we have target all elementary school grades in particular. And as you all know, it's easier to do field trips for elementary schools than it is for middle schools or high schools, just because of their daily operational schedule. Our curriculum coverings, topics that we cover are designed, and we reached out to Roper Mountain, to Paris Mountain, and to the Caesar's Head program, and specifically made sure that we didn't duplicate their programs. So we know the magic of making sure that we are curriculum driven and professionally designed in our curriculum content, because if you don't check the box for this subject matter has been covered, then the teachers aren't going to bring the kids. So we've been very careful to do that, obviously because we are a nature place and a nature space. We focus on nature-based education topics. So some of the things that Mr. Weeks touched on, we don't touch on, and we've talked with Mr. Weeks. Something else I'll put in here is we are hopeful to build a nature center that we've been working on. Some of the members of the district, teachers, and trustees have been involved in the stakeholder community. We've opened that up to the big tent of multiple agencies of the city, of the county, REWA, Greenville Water, all of the conservation organizations operating in the upstate. And so we've had 2 wonderful design charrettes to help us conceive that. And I know Roper Mountain's also building their sustainability center. Sarah's been on the stakeholder process for that. So we're all in this together. We don't consider ourselves to be at all in competition with Roper Mountain. As I said, Lake Coniston Nature Park is a community asset. It is basically our gift as our nonprofit, the Coniston Foundations. It's our gift to the city and the county of Greenville. We did what no one else would do. So it is a logical extension of every school. It is a logical extension of their campus. So,
how many public schools from our district and what grades have utilized guided nature education programs at your park?
I think that may have been in Jeff's presentation notes, on the order of about, I think maybe 40 out of your 90-some schools total, including the high school programs that we've done in the past.
What about self-guided programs?
We have 30 learning stations installed in the park and 10 more that are in the process of installation. There's no way to measure how many people get benefit from those, but we estimate we have over 100,000 people a year. Obviously, many of those are students from your schools that haven't been involved in guided programs per se.
Let's see, I think I had one more. You've pretty much covered with those questions and what we've already done. You've pretty much covered my questions. You're not in competition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You've been a valuable resource, and I appreciate your coming and spending time, as well as the Muddy Sneakers people and Mr. Weeks from Roper Mountain Science Center.
Well, I think all of us in the environmental education business very much appreciate that you brought this topic forward for the trustees to have this conversation. It's vital to the community, and it's an essential part of our children's educational experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for all of your hard work as usual. You did a great job and you answered all my questions, except for one.
Okay.
What can this board do to ensure that we are teaching environmental education and supporting your efforts?
Well, I mean, I think the board, you guys have been very supportive, I think, across what we do in our schools and our standards. And like I said, we could have done a probably 2-hour presentation or hour presentation on what we do in environmental science. It's a huge focus for my team, my science team, who was not able to be here today due to sickness. That it's a huge focus for them, and I wouldn't say at this point in time there's anything you guys have not done to support us in that effort. I think you've done a great job.
So when you bring recommendations forward that you need this or that, we ought to vote
And you'll
yes.
remember. That's right. That's right.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Roletta, and thank you so much, Mr. McCoy. But we have one last comment by Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison-Fair. I won't take but a moment, but I did want to take this opportunity to again recognize the importance and share our appreciation for all these public-private partnerships. And every one of those that Jeff shared with you that have been talked about here, some of the questions that were asked, they all represent, in some cases, public-private partnerships, and in other cases, public-private partnerships, whether they be delivering services directly to students on-site or at other locations, whether they be providing unique staff development opportunities to better train our teachers, in particularly in this case in environmental science. And I think we'd also be remiss if we did not take this opportunity to recognize the effort supported by this board for the unique facility that we have in Roper Mountain Science Center. And this board has committed on an annual basis just under $2 million a year to the operation of Roper Mountain Science Center. And it is a most unique and unusual offering that we have for our students. And these various other nonprofit entities and other public entities help us fill gaps that may exist even with the unique opportunities brought forth at Roper Mountain. So I think it's good that we recognize not just those public-private partnerships, but also the commitment of this body to the continued work of Roper Mountain Science Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. We will now proceed to item 2.03, Naviance. Mr. Jason McCreary.
Ms. Morrison-Fair, if I might, this is an update on Naviance. Dr. McCreary has been struck down with not just the flu, but some, I think, some compounding factors, and he's not able to be with us today. But so as not to defer this another month, we deferred it last month in the interest of time, Mr. McCoy is going to move forward with the presentation. There may be some questions that you might ask that Dr. McCreary might be uniquely positioned to answer, and we may need to get those answers for you and send them to you since he's not able to be with us today. If you recall, Naviance was a multi-year commitment that we paid up front. This is not the year in which it expires, so we would not be coming to you in this budget year with any sort of recommendation regarding it, but we believe it's important for you to have at least a little update on where we stand with Naviance, how we're using that, and our path forward with it in the coming year. Mr. McCoy?
Thank you, Dr. Royster. This presentation, as Dr. Royster said, Dr. McCreary was going to be given today, so I'll be filling in for him, probably not the same level that he would give the presentation, but it is something that he and I and Rob Rhodes and some others have discussed at length, and so we've met multiple times on that, so I'm very familiar with the topic and our path forward with this. So as you all recall, as Dr. Royster mentioned, Naviance is a system we procured really focused on both the college and career track. It's a platform for students to explore both their interests, if you will, for both college and or career. We'll talk about a few things as an overview about the things that are in there and what we've utilized. Excuse me. I'm trying not to capture what everybody else has. So we are trying to look at what we have utilized well in the system and where we need to shore up maybe a little bit and utilize better for our students' benefit for college and career planning. So so as we move forward, what Naviance is you can see the services down here. I'm not going to go through each of those. I will just point out a couple of things that we have in here that we are excited about. The Naviance eDocs, one of the things you may hear a lot about is the counselors being able to submit transcripts electronically through the system. That really helps with speeding up our transcript process for our college seniors who need to, or not college seniors, high school seniors who are moving on to college. And so we'll talk about some of these other things here as we go forward.
Could we get the door closed? Somebody? Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. McCoy.
That's all right. It was having a hard time focusing myself. So just some of the things we're going to talk about in this presentation. We're going to look a little bit at the artifacts review, what we looked at, how we evaluated. We're going to look at the counselor interviews that we talked to as far as Dr. McCurry did with this study. I do have Christine here, by the way, from Jason's office, that she may be able to, she helped at length with this, and we met yesterday, so she will also be able to help out with some questions that you may have. We also did some student focus groups to find out how the students are using it and what they're saying about it, since it is really a tool for them. The counselor surveys, 92 counselors surveyed, we'll talk about those results, and then overall a cost analysis of the system. So the first question was how and to what extent is Naviance being used? And so you kind of look through this and see, this is a typical, this is for 12th grade. This is a list, if you will, of the tasks that we would expect 12th graders to do in the system. This is worked through with Mr. Rhodes, worked with the counselors on creating these for each grade level. So that you can kind of see it's a progression, so it's not everybody doing everything at 1 year. So it's kind of spread out throughout their career where it makes sense to or throughout their schooling where it makes sense. And then there is, now these have obviously old dates on them because it was from that year, but those dates would change each year so the kids know when they need to have things done by and completed. The most valuable resource this provides obviously for us though is when we meet with kids for IGP conference, we have the counselors have information about that student, so we're not wasting time, if you will, trying to find that out every single time. We can pull up Naviance, we can find out what the student has explored, what their interests are, and we can really get down to the heart of helping that child with the next steps in their progression, whether it be career or college. So the usage percent completing activities, and this is a lot I recognize in the chart here, but if you'll look at the district averages, that may be as a sum, if you will. Overall, for example, at the bottom there in that first middle school column, 83% of the 6th graders completing their activities, 70% of 7th graders completing their activities, 86% completing activities. And so we do our best, and the counselors do their best to try to get those accomplished. We'll always, I don't know that we'll ever have 100% due to kids moving around and coming in at different times, but we do try to catch them up. Once they miss an activity, it's not like they can't go back and do it. And so our counselors can always try to catch them back up if they come in new to our district and they haven't completed the activities. Same thing for high schools. You can see those averages down at the bottom. Obviously, from looking at those, the high schools is one of our areas of focus with Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Smith. I think he's in here as well in the corner. That is our area of focus after this evaluation of looking at how do we really ensure that our high schools are using the system for the college and career planning arenas. This report here shows you the staff usage report as average by staff member, if you will, per year. This report is, for example, jail man, 19.8. Overall average, 19.8 usage per staff overall. Now, that can be a little skewed in the sense that somebody may use it 100 times and somebody use it 1 time, and you're going to get an average. So you just have to keep that in mind as you're looking at that report. The biggest user staff-wise of this is going to be your counselors. Teachers may use this, but teachers really wouldn't have a daily usage for Naviance as much as, and some teachers may, for example, English teachers. A part of this is building a resume. English teachers may do that actually in class with the kids. They may. It may be less connection for math teachers, but the system overall is more focused on the counselors using that and the parents and the students using the system. And certainly we make staff teachers aware of this. So just kind of usage here. On this report. I'll just explain a couple of these as we go through. So the active senior applications at the colleges. In 15-16, we had about 4,353 seniors, and you can see of those, 9,028 applications were submitted from those 4,000 seniors. Now, that doesn't mean every senior submitted one, obviously. Some are not going to college, and so they're not submitting that applications. But in most of the time, that may be some people submitting 4, 5, 6 applications to colleges. You can see that increase 2016, 2017. Overall, about the same number of seniors, but had a significant increase in the number of applications that were being submitted to colleges, which, again, all that can be done, a lot of that can be done through the system. The Career Cluster Finder assessment completed, 6,900, about 94% completed in grade 8 and 16-17. 15-16 was our year, our pilot year, not pilot year, but 15-16 was our first year, so we were still getting used to the system and getting kids in as well, so we are hoping to see increases, as you see, from 16-17 in all of these categories. The career clusters, 8 and 11, we had significant increases in that as well. 8th grade, 44,650 total clusters from 10,000 students, and they can add more than one cluster if they choose to from that. They may not know what they want to do right now. I'll let you look at the other ones there. I'm not going to go through each one of those that you can see, though. Goals created, again, they can create multiple goals if they choose to. Prospective college applications, which ones they think they're going to be applying for to colleges. And again, through that system, then the counselors can submit their e-docs as well. Surveys completed, those are both Naviance surveys and Greenville County surveys. So those are both types of surveys that we create in-house and that the Naviance system has. So some of the findings with Naviance, as Dr. McCreary and his office did the research, one of the areas for improvement certainly is we have the PSAT, SAT, and ACT exams, and in these students had very low completion rates. So that's one thing that we have made a focus for this year, is really trying to see if we can get the students to really engage in those practice exams for the college test, which would certainly help them towards scoring higher on SAT, ACT, and PSAT. So Mr. Reimer has been working with the principals this year. We've done multiple announcements to the principals to make sure they're aware. Some counselors have done some campaigns in the schools to kind of make sure the kids are aware of the fact that, hey, you've got this free test that we've paid for. You don't have to pay for it. We've paid for this test for you to take the SAT practice test or ACT practice test. So take advantage of that before you actually take the real test. Outside of that, some activities did have a low completion rate, and you can kind of see those there. These are types of activities, ones that were below an 80% completion rate. There are certainly ones, Mr. Rhodes has done a good job with the counselors, of really looking at some of these things and saying, you know, do we need to reevaluate some of these? Do we need to do all of these activities? And which ones do we need to focus on and work on? So he's done a really good job of trying to get that number, hopefully for this year, up above that 80% range. We certainly want things like SMART goals and resumes. Those are critical, we think, activities for kids to complete. So we want our students completing those things. And in some schools that we are working with, and we work with the assistant superintendents, both Dr. McDonald and Mr. Reimer, to work on those schools that maybe have low completion rates so that we can push in and kind of find out how are you using this and how can we assist you in using this to a better rate with your students. The IGP conference, if you will recall, one of the things this system does do is it was able to provide us with a system consistently across the district to put our IGPs. Prior to this, and now the one benefit of this is as Mr. Smith can pull IGP data, Mr. Rhodes can pull IGP data, which was very difficult for us to do before. It was being done in various ways in the district. It wasn't consistent. And so now we have a very consistent way of doing some of that. So you can kind of see again, IGP. We typically want that, I love 100%, but we'll probably never get 100% just because, again, movements and all those kinds of things that happen within our district. But somewhere between ideally 95 to 100% completion rates. We like it up in the 98% completion rates ideally when it comes down to the IGPs being completed. And then question 2, what is the perception of Naviance? So from the counselors group that we talked through, 3 middle school and high school, the middle school counselors reported some of the activities on the scope and sequence, such as resume building and game plan survey, would not grade a level appropriate. So that has been rectified. Jason, when he finished the study, met with us, and then we put plans in place to rectify some of these findings from Jason's office several months ago, actually. I think back in August, if I'm not mistaken. And so we rectified that. Mr. Rhodes worked with the counselors to kind of maybe realign some of those activities that would be more appropriate for grade levels and ages. 4 of the 6 counselors said Naviance saved them time with some of the activities. If you think about all the various things they have to do, everything is contained within one system now. So the e-docs where they send transcripts, pulling up IGP information, pulling up career information, all that is in one place now, so they're not going to multiple sources and programs. And then all the counselors that were surveyed reported that Naviance was easy to use for them on their side. From the survey, that included 62 counselors. Most of them like the Naviance for the vast information available to students. We didn't give you a whole big preview, but one of the things I loved about Naviance when we first implemented it was there's tons of videos that kids can go and explore about careers. If I think I might be interested in being a biomedical technician, I can go in and find a video on that and kind of read about somebody who's doing it in real life and whether that might be something I want to do. Ease of sending college transcripts is great in the system. All that can be done right in the system. It's much quicker. Career and post-secondary planning tools are all in one location again. Counselors found value in using Naviance, were comfortable using the program, they felt comfortable. And then we just asked them, if you didn't have Naviance, how would your practices change if you did not have it? And so 48% of them reported that their practices would not change, or they would have to use alternative methods to do the things they do now. 44% reported they would be negatively affected by losing instructional time, or processes would be slowed down, for example, transcript sending, because it would not be an electronic process like it is maybe now. And the remaining counselors did not answer that question or reflect an opinion on that. It's about 4% of the student perceptions that students that we surveyed. 4% of the 8th to 12th grade students and 6% of the students in grades 10 through 12 attempted the practice exams. So that is a very low rate. So that's one of the things, again, that we're focused on. How do we increase that rate? Because it's going to help them on those tests later on when they take them. So we're really focused on that, and we'll examine that again at the end of this year to find out how many of our students really have engaged in those test-taking activities. And only 2 of 41 students in the focus group reported using the Naviance system at home. Many of them, more of them are using it at school, but not so much at home. And again, out of 41 students, that wasn't a huge sampling, but of the 2 of the 41. And then almost all, 98% of the 41 students who reported using the program 1 to 2 times the entire school year of the 41, if you will. So again, that's something we have to be able to work with the students on, and the teachers or the counselors, about how we provide more opportunities for those students to engage in the system to really explore their college and career opportunities. From the student focus group, students at both middle and high school levels reported they enjoyed taking the career interest inventories. That's the ones that maybe you and I would have taken in school that would kind of come out and say, this is what you're maybe, based on your answers, would be more suited to, or you maybe need to explore, maybe about these fields that you might enjoy. They learned about themselves and future opportunities. And in high school, students particularly reported benefits of the course and career planning tools, and had positive experiences using the college match feature. They put in various criteria, and basically it spits out and says, hey, here's some colleges that you might want to consider based on all these criteria you put in. And so that gives a help narrowing it down for them as far as where to start searching for colleges. And then question 3 there, is there professional development ongoing support for Naviance? Counselors overall reported, we all had initial training, obviously, for counselors. And then many responded, 76% responded they received additional Naviance training. We offered additional Naviance training, and many of them took advantage of that. 4% that they did not receive additional or attend additional training in that regard. Naviance provided on-site workshops for counselors, one of those. And then we provided basic school usage reports. And aggregated reports cost extra, as we did find out through this, as we were going through this evaluation process. So that's something we're in process with Naviance and renegotiating some of those reports that we did not find were as easy to pull that we felt like we should have information to. And so we're working with Naviance on that. They do offer free technical support, more for Rob, that we'll work through that. And the district has offered multiple training sessions throughout the year. We do Summer Institute training each year, Summer Academy, 2 sessions during the school year, and then we do webinar trainings as well for those counselors who may not be able to come out from their schools to do that training. And then finally, how is each component being used? You can see the cost per area here of all of these services that we have. I will point out to you the ones that have the red symbols, if you will, by them, and we have it at the bottom here. It's a little hard to see on the red and black there. But on that first one there, the Naviance Alumni Tracker, there was a technical glitch that first year. And so as a result of that, that glitch, we were able to get our money back, or credit back from that issue. And so they did not, we're getting credits back for that. And then on the second one, the Naviance Course Planner, that was not used, so we did receive a credit. Part of that was some Naviance issues. Part of that was some of our issues with Power School, trying to make all that work together. So they did give us a credit on that as well. We are also in process of evaluating, as I mentioned, the Prep Me, which is the ACT, SAT test prep. We're in the process of putting a plan. Well, we already did put a plan in place for that. We will evaluate that again in June to determine, did our students, did that marketing and all that campaigning that we did that increase the usage of that Prep Me practice test? And certainly we hope it will. And so the recommendations that came out of this was to create an advisory group to annually solicit actionable feedback on how to improve the teacher and counselor practices and students' experiences in Naviance. So that has been done. Some of these things you'll see implemented because like I said, we met with Jason several months ago, and we've implemented many of these recommendations. And so Rob has implemented that with his counselors as far as an advisory group that meets to talk about how do we improve and what do they need help with. Develop and implement, monitor ongoing professional development to incorporate annual trainings. That's also been implemented. Now, we did target some different audiences, so making sure we have our new counselors that get trained initially when they come on board, refreshing the training for everybody else that needs it, and then maybe providing more in-depth training for teachers, for counselors, rather. And then evaluate professional development for effectiveness. So again, that is something that's ongoing. So I would say it's not implemented in the sense that we've, it's kind of an ongoing practice, and that would be that would be Rob's kind of job to kind of keep that going and making sure that the training is adequate to meet the needs that the counselors have. Provide counselor input and follow up on current and future needs. We have done that as far as through those focus groups. They've given us some great recommendations. Part of that was what things we need to be doing and not need to be doing in those in some of those student activities. Set expectations, train and institute practices that engage both students and teachers in Naviance that are being less utilized. Like I said, that was implemented as well. That's the Prep Me piece specifically that's not being utilized, and we are putting things in place to make sure that that is more utilized. And then close the knowledge loop existing between schools and the district by channeling inquiries and solutions from Naviance technical support. Sometimes counselors were calling directly to Naviance technical support, which they will answer those questions. The problem is we don't always know when we have a district-wide problem when that happens. And so now with it being channeled through one person, Rob can kind of see a trend, or Brooks can kind of see a trend and say, okay, this is a problem across the board, or maybe we need more training on this across the board. Demonstrate that resources are being well spent and the program is effective. Again, that's going to be ongoing, looking at those items, which ones are not being utilized. And ultimately, when it would be time for evaluating the contract renewal, if we renew that contract, it would be some things maybe we just take off the contract and we say, you know, we're not able to get kids to use these features, and maybe these aren't going to be as effective moving forward. Request aggregate reports from Naviance at no cost. Like I said, we've already in the process of doing that with them. Based on advisory group feedback, usage reports actually to intended program outcomes. In other words, look at the purpose and the outcomes of each Naviance component. Why do we want kids to take the practice tests? Why do we want kids to do the course planning? Why do we want kids to do the career interest survey? So making sure that those things are still aligned, that we do want students to still be doing these activities we've outlined, and it's valuable for them. Some services were not being utilized well. We already talked about the practice exam as well. Actively market Naviance for student and parent use at home. The parent usage, if you will recall, when we had talked about logins for parents, was very low. That does not necessarily mean that parents are not using the system. Kind of when we did some informal surveying with that, a lot of the parents are using their child's or standing over their child's shoulder. Parents aren't going to go in and do the activities for the kids, obviously, we hope. And we want the students doing that. So a lot of times when that's happening and the parents conferring, they're going to be logged into their child's account. So that one's a little hard to measure sometimes. Regularly evaluate the cost, usage, and effectiveness. That's part of our yearly evaluation plan, of course. And then prior to the 5-year end contract, have a plan that outlines the planning needs and goals in relation to the product's fit versus effectiveness and cost. So again, if we find items that we don't feel like we're getting our return on investment on, either dropping those from the contract. We're trying to identify those up front, though, so that we can be prepared when that comes, that we've tried to implement the things like the PSAT and the SAT practice test. We can't make kids do that, obviously, but we want to give the kids the opportunity, particularly those students who may not be able to afford to pay for those other practice tests outside the system. So we want to be able to provide that opportunity equity-wise to all students. And I think we're open to questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. McCoy. That was excellent information. Let me see. I have Mrs. Leventis Wells and then Mrs. Caldwell. Okay. Everybody. Mrs. Leventis Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff, I'm looking at the graph where it says usage by schools, and I was a little concerned with those numbers as far as the average visits per school by staff per year.
Oh, the staff one?
Yes, right there. You know, I'm looking at, and I'm wondering why it's so low. That concerns me.
And that certainly was a concern of ours, too, when Jason first presented this information. And so part of that follow-up was working with the assistant superintendents when we had this an executive team to kind of look at following up with those schools to make sure that they are utilizing, that they should be utilizing the program and how we expect them to utilize the program. So this obviously was from last year, 16-17, so we will be pulling that again
for
this
comparisons.
Year. For comparisons.
So this contract is 5 years?
Correct.
And is it about $1 million a year? Or what, I was trying to, how much?
Yeah, we've got
Per year.
I've got it on here somewhere. Here it is here. This is the annual rate.
It's $922,000 a year for the 5 years.
For $1 million for 5 years.
So just under $1 million
So
for 5
I'm trying to
years.
make sure that if these things are, you know, when you're looking at the percentage of students utilizing it, and some of staff and counselors have asked for more training, I'm wondering how productive this program really is. I mean, I'm sure it is. Every tool is of value, but is there something of better value than this? I just don't know. I'm looking at these numbers, and I'm looking at all of the options here, and I'm just not sure.
And I would really focus on, as Christine and I talked about yesterday, and we're working with Naviance on this, we would be careful about this graph with the staff one, because we had a lot of issues getting that graph from Naviance and exactly what it represented. I would focus more on this part, and certainly I don't disagree with you. We certainly want our counselors moving more, but what Christine and I talked about, I think yesterday, or Jason and I, that we know in some schools counselors are in this every single day, and sometimes that doesn't seem to be represented on that graph. And so I would look at this, because this really talks about, you know, 95% of the sixth graders at Beck Academy are completing all activities. That's, I don't remember how many that is in sixth grade, but it's a 8, 9, 10 activities that they're completing. So they're logging in multiple times to do that.
And then there were 2 out of 41 students that utilize this at home. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm
just trying to figure out. I mean, I think that's low, but what age bracket was that?
Well, that was high school, if I remember correctly. Let me pull that up for you.
Well, again, your questions and the questions we have go directly to this point, and this is the reason we did this, study.
So
they'll follow it up this spring. We'll do another one next year, and that will help inform our recommendation as to whether or not to continue it for another 2-year period, 3-year period, or 5-year period. To see if it's producing the results that we want to produce, and the utilization is where we'd like for it to be.
Thank you. And I agree. I love comparisons to see where we were and where we are and where we're headed. I just don't want to take so much time from teachers and staff and people learning a program that maybe are not as interested in the program to the point where then they have to learn about a different program. And we keep giving these people more and more work to do, and we're trying to make sure that we're helping them in the process and to make things easier, but we just keep loading them up with additional tasks.
And I will go back to where this is here, that overall the counselors, 44% of them said their practice would be negatively affected. One of the things we looked at this when we talked to counselors was the many different programs they had to go to do their job.
Okay.
IGPs in particular, the most valuable piece I find of this, and you may have gone through that in the schools, but when I sit down with a child and I got to spend the first 20 minutes kind of finding, well, Ms. Wells, what do you want to do when you grow up? And what do you, I can pull that up now and have that. She's not sure. I can pull that, and then I can counsel her now, though, because I have her career interest inventories, and I can say, well, based on this, I would recommend you look at this. I would say in the past we never had that before. So I believe our IGP conferences are much more meaningful, and sometimes that's a little hard to capture in some of this. But I agree with you. There is, all over this, there is ways to improve, and that's what we're going to do.
I just see so many red flags that are really concerning me. But I'm sure that, there's a plan in place.
There is a very hefty plan in place, yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker, Ms. Caldwell.
Thank you, Jeff, for the report. But I wanted to ask, you said that y'all have put some strategies in place for these things. Can you tell me some of the strategies you've put in place?
Yeah, so the for the Prep Me test specifically, that one was one of the lowest usage pieces on here of the Naviance system. And so for that, what we did was we worked with Mr. Reimer, And I went to a principal meeting at the beginning of the year. I think it was, or it may have been last spring actually, but I think it was the beginning of this year we did it. We've done it multiple times. He's followed up as well. With the schools we have this resource. Some principals are brand new and they just missed the presentation we did in the spring, and so some were brand new and didn't realize we had the PSAT, SAT, ACT practice test. So we advertise it that way. We also work with counselors, Rob has, work with counselors to really get that information out to them to make sure they know that their kids have access to this information, and do some marketing campaigns at the school so that the kids know. Again, if they're going to college, if they're taking that test, not all children are going to take that test, but for the ones that are going to take those tests, that they have a practice test to do it with.
Okay, you said that this was a beneficial tool for the counselors whenever they're sitting down doing the IGPs.
Correct.
But the percentages that you have of the kids taking part in the activities, do they have all of the information when they sit down with them, since the percentage is so low with them taking part in this?
They have. So every one of those activities would not necessarily be used in an IGP conference. So yes, they prioritize those activities that are on, I don't remember what page that's on. They would prioritize these activities to the students, and they can send reminders out to students to say, hey, don't forget you need to take this. The ones that would be very important for us to do, if you look at, like, for example, the career interest profile assessment, so we know what they're interested in. So certainly we have some room to improve in there. We don't have all students taking that yet. We missed about 1,000 students there in that. So that would be a goal of trying to get the rest of those students to take that interest inventory, that career assessment.
So do they tell them that this is a prerequisite for you coming in to do your IGP?
They don't do we wouldn't do a
so that they would have the information?
We don't do a prerequisite. Now, they would push and push and push on that, but ultimately we're held by law to do that IGB conference. So if they don't do it, we still have to hold that IGB conference.
Maybe Mr. Rhodes can tell me this. I want to get a breakdown of the middle school and high school counselors on their time of how much is spent individual face-to-face with our students, because that's the most important thing for the counselor, to build a relationship with their students. And with them having all of this other stuff to do, I'm not talking about classroom guidance and stuff like that. Some of the students are not able to get to their counselors because the counselors have all this other stuff to do. So can I get a breakdown as to how much time the counselors are being able to meet with the students?
I mean, the only way we certainly could ask and poll the counselors on that. That'd be the only way to do that. I mean, there's no way of tracking that officially, but we could ask the counselors for, estimated time. Now, I will say, with the IGB conference, of course, all of them are meeting, that hour of IGB conferences for every student.
Yeah, but that's one time a year.
It is.
And they need to meet with their counselors more than once a year. And some of them, you know what I'm saying.
Some of them, right. Some of them are going to see their counselors multiple times a year, certainly, in many cases. But we can ask that information, but there's no way to track that other than just asking the counselors how much time they feel they spend individually one-on-one with students.
Okay. With the counselors, on your thing, it has about what would change if Naviance wasn't available, and that's close, 48% and 44%. That it wouldn't change, and it would change. It would negatively impact it. So. You said 30 out of 62, is it that we only have 62 counselors?
These counselors, if I remember correctly, these were the ones that answered, no, we have more than 62 counselors. These are the ones that answered the survey.
Okay. So what percentage of, what is this percentage of how many counselors we have that answered the survey?
Do you remember, Christine, how many counselors, middle school and high school? 150. So
you only had 62?
62 out of 150.
That's less than half. I guess we got to do better on the survey and getting them to answer it.
We always push for the survey. I don't remember, Dr. Worcester may remember what the average return rate on surveys is.
What
is it?
There's a lot of stuff out there about surveys. Generally speaking, lot of our surveys that go out to all employees, if we've gotten 10-20% return, we've considered that good. If you look at the information and research out there about employee surveys, a lot of places will tell you better than 50%. Some of them recommend that you have 60 to 90%. Now, what they all caution about is forcing people to answer surveys. And when you force a person to answer a survey, you tend to force a response. So there's some concern there. So all these were voluntarily administered. Now, again, this is a tool we're using to assess whether or not Navient is an effective program.
Right.
Whether it's the most effective one or not, that's what we're seeking to determine. One thing it's done, and I don't think we could, I don't know that we can overemphasize this. Prior to this, we had little to no consistency in IGP development and tracking, and it has provided that for us, which removes a great paperwork burden from counselors. We also have directed that counselors not be the individual in a building responsible for testing, and that they not have administrative responsibilities. Those are not negotiable. So their time should be spent group counseling, individual counseling, classroom presentations, that IGP, very important part of their responsibility at the middle school level with 8th graders, career development with 7th graders as they go into doing their IGP in the 8th grade. Then at the high school level, you have to review the IGP because, as you know, students quite often change their mind multiple times. So counselors have to keep up with that. Our intent with guidance counselors is to keep them focused on delivering guidance counseling services to our students, either in individual or group settings.
That's why I asked for the percentage,
right,
of time that's spent with the students.
And we do not track that in the way that you're asking for it, because for them to sit and write down what they're engaging in during the day actually takes them away from those activities they're engaging in. Several years ago, we did a study. We can do another one. When we do the studies, we've done sample studies. In other words, what's a guidance counselor spending their time doing typically during a school day? And I think it's probably been, Rob, 7-8 years since we've done one of those studies that Dr. McCrary's office has done. And I think we're now at a ratio of 300 to 1 at the middle and high school level. So you can pretty quickly calculate how much time in a 6.5-hour school day that allows for guidance counselor interaction with single students, groups of students, or individual students. So we believe that they are wisely using their time, but as with so many other areas of our profession, whether it be classroom teacher, assistant principal, whoever it might be, there are just increasing demands brought about by the complexity of the students that we deal with. And I know you're aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I don't want this to be an increase in demand this on them, just like Ms. Wells, LaVentus Wells said, that, you know, we don't want to give them more and more when it is taken away from the students.
Right,
and we know that's what they're here for.
And we know that a significant part of this helps them carry out some of their primary job functions. Now, is there something else out there that might do the same thing more efficiently or less costly? We would need to look at that. But right now, that, for example, those middle school guidance counselors managing that IGP, that is a huge asset to them, right, minimizing their time.
Right, but with the usage report on here, with it being so utilized so little, that's what threw me on that.
Right, and that's what
it's supposed to be a good tool for them.
And that's our concern, and that's what Mr. McCoy, Mr. Rhodes, and the folks associated with that, and also Dr. McDonald and Mr. Reimer, as far as how are our guidance counselors using it, are they making the maximum use out of it? Because we believe if they are using it, and we know they're using it to do their IGPs because they have to do that. However they responded to that survey, they have to do that within Naviance. because that's how we keep up with it. And we've got just under 100% IGPs at
95 to 100.
Right.
Just on the grade level.
You know, and obviously some people move in, move out, something happens to them. But it is the highest degree of compliance with IGPs that we've ever been able to record.
That's good.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Without any objections, I have so many people that are interested. Why don't we just extend this clear through lunch? 15 additional minutes, please.
What are you drinking?
Okay, Mr. Lewis, you have the floor.
Since I think that means we each get 30 seconds, I will ask the one question that I have. So, you know, the one thing that kind of stood out to me was the ACT usage. I know there's a question about whether the students chose to do it or do we have any sort of evidence that the students who did it performed better on the ACT? Is there a
Not the only way you'd be able to capture that data if the student had taken the SAT once and then done practice tests and taken the SAT again.
Okay.
We would not have a way necessarily to track that. Now, you know, across the country and test prep, as far as test preps go, we know that kids who engage in the practice tests actually tend to do better on the SAT, ACT than their peers who don't.
Okay.
But as far as us tracking that, most of those would have been first timers taking the test.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Meeks.
Thank you. In the interest of time, also, I think that the others have expressed their concern and my concern over how little it's being utilized. So I think the administration is addressing that. So that's my concern. Thank you.
And I will, Mr. Meek, just also mention, since it's come up a couple of times, that was after 1 year of implementation on that. And so it is a massive system. It is a lot of training, and it's a lot of fees. So I fully expect at the end of this year, when we do the same, maybe not to this depth, we same questions and different things, we'll have more usage among our staff. It always takes, we find, within that first year of implementation, we always find people kind of struggling to use it and learn the system and all that. So typically that gets better, but we certainly will monitor that moving forward.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, that's on his time, not mine.
Yeah, I'll take ownership of that 30 seconds I use it.
Dr. O'Connor, we're doing great.
Yes,
right
I'll take the other 14. First, I would like to say that I really have spent time with this tool and love it. Mm-hmm. And I'm anxious for more people to get into it and use it because I think they will too. So the most important comment that I want to make is that I am thankful that we did an evaluation of a new program fairly early on to be able to know how well we're implementing an expensive new tool, and so that we can redirect our resources to improve the utilization of the tool that we've spent money on. So this is a great day. This is a great thing to see because we used our limited evaluation resources and got a big result out of it. And now I would expect that when you come back, the utilization will be much better because we did the evaluation work that we did. So I'm excited to see that and completely confident that it'll be better when it comes back around for having done this study. One thing on the Prep Me part, I want to make the comment that I don't understand why we wouldn't have all of our students taking the ACT, given that we say that we want to focus on how we're doing on college readiness and career readiness in the district. We need some tool that shows how we're doing from year to year. And if it's all self-selecting, then the only thing we know is how well those students who select in are doing. But we don't have a way to track district performance on college readiness without one tool that all students, one test that all students are taking, to be able to say, okay, we expect that we want to see an increase, a growth, a trend in the positive for those who are college ready. There's no real way to do that if we, just because the state says they don't all have to take it. I wish that the district would continue to require it, because we've got a good foundation laid, and then we'd be able to see how are we doing with college readiness. And the fact that you have one tool at your disposal to say, let's try to increase those who are taking advantage of the free practice test, whether it be ACT, PSAT, or SAT. I'm interested, like Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell, in those strategies, but I picture that, you know, if every high school knew that next year a slide was going to go up in front of the Board of Trustees showing how many of their students participated in the tests we're buying for them, you know, they could get some incentive just by knowing that this is a really highly visible opportunity for you to show growth in those students who are moving toward college readiness. And even in, you know, obviously the middle schoolers are doing better with engagement because there's a little more control, I guess, over them and what they're doing with their time. But if we could, you know, bump that up with high school, which I'm sure we will do with Dr. Rhodes and Mr. Reimer's push in that direction. But I just feel like that is one really good place to look, is for the numbers of students and numbers of tests taken by high school by the time we come back around, and trying to bring attention to that. The others is, let's see, the measures of college readiness, and then there was another instance in there that people responded very positively to, that said it was helpful to them. Jeff?
The students part, you mean, for
Yes.
students? Yes.
Was it in terms of the college match, I believe?
Yes, the college match was very popular, and they enjoy career interest inventories.
So one thing I wondered is if PTAs are getting information at their meetings or SICs to help them understand that this college match portion is there, and the free test practice, because some of those really active PTAs, you would think, would be very appreciative, knowing that only such small numbers are participating at home, and what they could do to boost that number between now and next year if they want to see this really important tool continuing. So those are just a couple of thoughts, but I'd like to hear your reaction.
Well, I certainly think that that's a great suggestion, but with the PTA piece, certainly. I think we did have a higher rate of students percentages taking the college college match pieces. That'll never be 100% necessarily, because again, a lot of them are not maybe going to college, and they know they're not going to college. But we have a fairly high percent, we believe. You know, we don't necessarily know. It's hard to do a percentage because we don't know how many kids are saying they're going to college versus how many are using that tool to match their colleges. I don't know that we could ever get an accurate percentage there. But I certainly recognize that that's a great suggestion with the PTA piece, and putting that out to Ms. Welch's office to have her distribute that, and possibly with the Prep Me stuff as well, and just say, hey, did you know this is available? Because I certainly agree the more we can get it out there to parent groups, and we know some parents are actually paying for PSA practice tests, and we already have it. So, you know, trying to get that communication out is always a struggle, but I like the suggestion of doing it with the parent group.
And we did hear that from some of the community groups for the comprehensive ed planning meetings. I remember a parent saying that they really loved this tool, and then other parents in the room saying, what is it? I had no idea. So I know that in year one of implementation, that's to be expected in a way, but at least now we know where the gaps in understanding are, and the usage that we need to focus on.
Where we can focus,
Anyway, I think once people get into it, they'll see these wonderful uses for it, and I'm optimistic that things like this effort of evaluating it and reacting to it will prove beneficial. So thank you.
And our last person is Mrs. Wells.
How many minutes do I have? All right. It's one one question to make sure I understood this data correctly when I reviewed it. And the usage that's percent completing activities, is that completing all activities they were assigned or completing any of the activities?
Are you talking about this one here? This
Yes.
chart?
Yes, because you list in the chart before, you kind of show, here's some of the activities they could do.
Right.
So does that usage represent the percent of students completing any activity, or is it, because they would have been given okay, do SMART goals, do career assessment,
Right.
Did they complete all of those, or just one?
I'm going to defer to Christine on that one.
It's a composite of the scope and sequence goals, so it is all, a percentage of all required activities in the scope and sequence.
A percentage of all required activities. That's not a percentage of students. So if students were given multiple activities, this represents a percentage of the activities completed, not the percentage of students that participated in completing activities. Okay.
And we do have that, and we have a lot more charts and graphs than we shared with you. So we have these when we're doing our planning implementations. We've broken these down into areas of need.
Okay, because that might tell you a different story.
And it certainly does, actually, by activity, actually, and that's where some of that information came when Rob worked with the counselors as far as we have low percentage of kids completing this, let's look at this, is this even age appropriate for the grade level?
Right.
So we break those down into individual activities in order to find out why the kids aren't using if we do feel like it's valuable.
Okay. All right, so that helps me clarify, and I may have a follow-up question that I need to email when I think about the data in that way. A broader question is, why did we purchase Naviance? Because this talks about how we're used. This is a tool. This is a software
Correct.
program, but it's just ultimately a tool. So I want to kind of get back to why did we decide to use Naviance? Because this is good data about the utilization of it, but doesn't really get to, are we getting what we wanted out of it?
Sure. So one of the big goals of that one, and I was involved with that to a little degree, at least when Dr. Washington was here, working with everybody to select that tool, and the committee that we had, because there was a committee involved in that of various folks, principals and all that. One of the big things was finding more resources for students to explore careers and the types of activities like they're in here, like interest inventories and those types of things. Because one of the challenges was in the past when you sit down, as I mentioned before, when you sit down with that IGP conference, a lot of it was starting over. 300 kids, they have per year, starting over again to figure out where are you, what do you want to do, all that kind of stuff. We really were trying to find something the kids could explore at a depth their interests. Counselors have a hard time, as expected. They can't know everything about every career. And so that tool for them really allowed the students to explore, as Dr. Balakana mentioned, all those videos and all those things that kids can go in there and explore. We really never had anything like that before, other than tools one-off here and there that counselors could point them towards. So that was number one, is giving them that information for the kids so that they could prep for, if you will, the IGB conference, so that those IGB conferences were more rich, I would say, and valuable to what the goal was versus just a checkbox that I met with this child for an hour for their IGB conference. We want that time to be meaningful. Yeah. And in order for it to be meaningful, there's certain information that counselors need to have to make that meaningful.
Okay. And so what I remember us discussing that. I thought I also remember discussion about to save counselors time so that, to your point, IGPs would be effective, right? And so that it would help them. They wouldn't be sending transcripts manually, and they wouldn't be mailing things.
Correct.
So I think in that way, certainly Naviance has been a more efficient tool for letting kids, once they all figure out how to use it to apply to colleges, to request transcripts be sent. As counselors get more comfortable, I think they're going to do a better job with that.
Agreed.
I guess to the point about it making IGPs better, maybe part of the utilization and the effectiveness of this tool really has to do with making sure we have a robust IGP program that uses this tool versus looking at Naviance as the program that does everything. Because what I see, so what I know is high schools generally they don't schedule an hour, they schedule you for 20 to 30 minutes So in terms of how long is an IGP meeting, the standard IGP meeting is 20 to 30 minutes. You go in, they have a checklist, they work through. If the student has completed the Naviance data, maybe they can pull it up, but to your point, if the student has not been compelled to do that, they're not using it. The schools that I know of that have been effective are the ones who will find a time to take groups of students into the media center, sitting with laptops, and say, okay, complete your career assessment. This is really important. Complete it and fill it out. So to me, the piece that still seems to be kind of disjointed and missing is that we don't seem to have a great seamless program of how are we building individual graduation plans for students. Because if the student doesn't do that career interest inventory, that 20 or 30 minutes is pretty useless. Hey, do you know what you want to do? Right. No. Okay, we'll put undecided. Right. So, that's...
And that's what I would say is what we're working on from the results of this plan is how do we, whether it be that we just say to schools, at least these items are critical for students to have for the IGP. It may not be all 10 of those items, but those items, the career interest inventory or whatever it happens to be, like the resume may not be as critical given the kids haven't done a lot in school yet necessarily to build that, but we want them to get it built. But that might not be critical for the IGP conference. So maybe, if we decide ultimately, and it's a strategy with Mr. Reimer and the high school principals, say, look, at some point in the year, your counselors really need to make sure before IGPs is done that this career interest inventory is done. So whether you put it out there and 80% of the kids do it and you pull the 20% that didn't do it, or you do it for the whole school, there's a lot of different strategies we've talked about how to get to that point to make the IGP conferences more successful.
Well, and I think the individual graduation plan really should be something that we're able to integrate. I know there's some schools that integrate the resume building into their English classes, so they talk to kids about that. So I think we keep saying college and career readiness is number one, college and career readiness. Well, then the IGP process shouldn't be a half-hour meeting and did you go use the software. It really should be kind of this building thing. So I think the data, I'm not surprised by it that 8th grade uses it a ton because that's that first IGP and it's always the most meaningful from every parent I've ever talked to about the IGPs. And then I can see where it would slip over time because you do run out of time sort of to do it. So I think focusing on what does the program look that uses this tool will help create more usage out of the tool. Absolutely. I still think it's a really valuable tool. The other information I thought we were going to try to get out of this was we really didn't have good ideas about career clusters. Like every school kind of had their own way. They had a Google Doc or they had some way to keep up with what are the career clusters students are choosing. So we really weren't connecting our programs, whether it's CTE or just high school programs, to what students wanted. So are we now able, do we have all that data now in Naviance, and are we able to use that? Is that another benefit of this that we've been able to glean some good information from?
And Brooks, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe I've seen a report out of that you've pulled for the career clusters to find out what kids are selecting within Naviance. Yeah, so we do have it by school, by cluster, because that's just a data point that we can capture and pull that in an aggregated report. Okay. So we do have that.
And then are we using that with high schools to plan what are the career opportunities we're offering to our students?
We do have the specific program to match that cluster. We do try to be very prescriptive, if you will, of making sure the students that are interested in, say, manufacturing are made aware of. If they're a career high school, they're made aware of what manufacturing programs are available on, as well as career high school as well.
Okay, but beyond just communicating to them, here's where you might go get that, are we also using that data to do planning around, I guess with the high school principals, what they're offering in their schools? Because that's where we had some disjointedness too, I believe.
Yes. Now there would be, I don't remember, Brooks, how many years of data we have on that. We've talked about that with the trend data because you obviously can't change focuses every year. So we've talked about trend data that we see, after a 2-year data, we can kind of say, okay, this school overall, there's a lot of kids coming into the school that want, whatever, have a medical focus. So then being able to put those programs in place, because as you know, putting courses in place and getting teachers trained up and all that takes is time and money, and so we want to make sure it's not a change every year that we're going back and forth with. So certainly that trend data over years, it will dictate. I think we've got 1 year of it now, or 2 years we'll have now of that trend data that we can then really start with Mr. Reimer to work with those principals if they're not already to say, hey, your kids are overall, they're really saying that they're interested in medical. I don't really see a lot of medical programs in your school or dual credit. So what are you doing to try to move that school towards that?
Yeah, I'm going to just say one thing.
Can you go up to this microphone?
Yeah, you need to go.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, we do. Okay.
And Ms. Morrison-Fair, I did hear the beeper, but, okay. Awesome.
Well, I just wanted to add one thing to demonstrate that we specifically look at the data and try to be prescriptive with it. The biggest career cluster was health science. Out of 20,000 students, 6,000 were selecting health science, way beyond any of the other 15 career clusters. So being aware of that, we prescriptively moved those courses to the high schools to make them more accessible, and so we're closing in on 3,000 students being in health science classes as opposed to 300 students being in health science classes. And that was a strategy that was directly connected to looking at the data by which cluster students were selecting. And since that time, many of our high schools have added second health science instructors on their campus. So those programs continue to grow, and that decision was connected directly to the numbers of students that had picked that particular cluster.
Okay, awesome. So I think it's great to hear. Again, we're leveraging data and information that we really had trouble getting before, and I think that's another value of Naviance or some tool like Naviance, because that's going to be more important than any counseling we do if we can put them in the classes. So thank you for the report. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Morrison-Fair.
And I appreciate all my colleagues and your questions. And Mr. McCoy, thank you for your presentation. I will now turn this back over to the chairman.
Thank you very much, Ms. Morrison-Fair. Now we will turn our administration portion of the agenda over to Mr. Lewis.
All right. Item 3.01 is recommendation for waiver of snow days. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. You have in your packet and in front of you a recommendation from the administration for the waiver of snow days. As you recall, we have had a most unusual year this year. I believe we've missed 2 days with the hurricane and then 4 more with snow, ice, or some variable of those circumstances. As you will recall, we are required by statute and have for a number of years included in our annual calendar 3 built-in makeup days. They're set aside. Everyone knows when they are. We have already scheduled the use of those days for the first 3 days that we missed. The most recent statute passed by the legislature sets up a little different circumstance for makeup days than existed in years past. The first 3 come in your built-in calendar. You're required to make them up. If you miss days 4, 5, and 6, it is up to the local board of trustees to determine whether or not those days be made up. If you miss beyond days 4, 5, and 6, I believe up to and through 7, 8, and 9, a request would have to go to the State Board of Education to waive those days. Again, we're at 6 days. We are in the midst of February. If our luck follows the course it's run all year, we might be looking at some other inclement weather before the end of winter. If it follows the course of the last week or so, maybe we'll have early spring. That's what we're hoping for. But regardless of that, we've already missed 6 days. We found through experience, and I think most districts have had this same experience, you have a little bit of a diminished attendance on days that are already scheduled to be makeup days if they're needed. When you get into days that aren't scheduled and already on the calendar, and you have to look for days, extending the school year, reducing spring break, Saturdays, whatever those might be, you get a very diminished rate of attendance. So we believe that days 4, 5, and 6 would offer a point of very diminished return by having school on those days. So the administration's recommendation is that the board waive the makeup of days 4, 5, and 6, understanding that we will make up 1, 2, and 3. And I think the phenomenon that you always see, it doesn't matter if a teacher misses class because they're out with an illness, or you have something happen in the building, or you have inclement weather. I think people have a good idea of here's how much needs to be done in a year, and they do everything they can do to ensure those things happen, whether it's the 180 days or some number less than that. There are always things we have choices about, and I think when we get in a crunch like that, people make the decisions to make sure that those things that are most important to be done are done. So it is our recommendation that the board waive the makeup of days 4, 5, and 6. Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. Ms. Roletter.
I move to waive the requirement to make up 3 school days missed as a result of inclement weather.
We have a motion from Ms. Roletter. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
We have a second from Mr. Sailors. Any discussion?
There you go.
Mr. Sailors, do you? Okay. Mr. Meek.
Thank you. Dr. Royster, what would be the economical savings over the 3 days for the school district?
The savings of not making up those 3 days, we would have realized savings in the days we were closed on energy. We would realize some amount of savings in the operation of our magnet buses related simply to the operation of the buses. We really won't recognize a savings in employees because we provide opportunities for hourly employees to regain their wages either through training or providing needed services. So probably the single greatest thing would be energy savings, and that's still probably at about $50,000 a day for any day that we're shut down. And we say shut down when we're operating on setback temperatures.
Okay, what would be the expense if we went ahead and had the 3 days of school?
There should be no additional expense to the district that I can immediately calculate. And Mr. Knotts is sitting back there, and he doesn't like to calculate quickly for fear of leaving something out. If it was we realized the cost savings in energy on the days we didn't have school. So if we have it, say you had it on a Saturday or a day in the summer or a day of spring break, it's simply a swap off. We saved it during December, we'll spend it during spring break or at the end of the year. The other, I don't think there would be any cost beyond that. It's not a tremendous cost savings, and to make them up is not a tremendous change in expenditure. It's the value of the days and the what we would generally project to be very low attendance that drives our recommendation. And we get to the end of the year with graduation binding us on one end, then we'd have to go into the week after graduation unless we chose to make those up during spring break or on a Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Levin as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Royster, I understand. I've had comments on both sides. You know, please vote for taking care of these 3 days because it will extend into whatever. I've also had comments that said, you know, don't you feel like our students will be missing some academic leadership and I mean, they've gone on to explain their positions. I've also heard on the other side that first semester has already been completed and exams, midterms have already been taken and grades have already been posted, and this would not interfere with their tests and so forth. Can you give me some speaking points on all of those options?
Well, I mean, to the point that you've already made, it won't interfere with what's gone on first semester. The number of days, because of seat time requirements, the number of days in a semester don't actually have to be equal. We've always equally divided them, but they don't have to be equal. They've already taken their exams for first semester. Some of them who were on 7-period days, actually, we allowed them to administer their exams before Christmas. Others administer them during January, particularly the block schools. Any day you miss school, you miss out on something.
Right.
But any day when you have significant lowered attendance, there is a desire not to teach new items because of the number of students who miss out on those items. I think there is also always a push, as I mentioned before, if you're a teacher and you're absent because you had the flu, if you're out for any reason, you're going to come back and try to, whatever you can do to catch up the work that would have gone on by making some choices, perhaps removing some things you believed were less important than other things. So I think there's always going to be the push to make sure that students get what they need to have during that period of time. Anytime you put something out that's not already scheduled, then you run into all these issues with parents who already have plans to take this trip or that trip or go here or go there. Runs into, if you extend over into the summer, teachers who may have already made those plans, so forth. Our teachers, for example, counselors, people like that, they're all paid on a 37.5-hour week. I think it's probably a rare occasion that they work only a 37.5-hour week. So they're working for that money they would receive. Our hourly employees have to make up that time. So no one is being paid for some work that they haven't done or time they haven't put in. So if that's a concern, sometimes you hear that as a concern from people. They've either already done that because they work in excess of, many of them in excess of 40 hours every week that they don't get paid necessarily directly compensated for. Those that get paid by the hour have to work to earn that money. So it's not a good situation. We don't like being in that situation, but we believe this recommendation reflects the best thinking of how to progress through this. Again, we don't normally miss this many days during the school year.
Excuse me, Ms. Levin as well, if we could just extend for 5 minutes.
Yes, that took care of mine. Thank you so much for your answer.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Dr. Royster? Dr. Royster, I just have one question.
Yes, sir.
Can you help me understand the difference between the classifications of employees who are expected to make up time that they missed, the ones that have the opportunity to make it up at some other time? The emails I get, I'm a little confused on how those break out. So
well, and unfortunately, the way we have classified employees since the Fair Labor Standards Act began to apply to school districts does not lend itself to being easily understood.
Okay.
So the best way to approach it is we fall under the requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act. So unless you are exempt, an exempt person would be a salaried employee. All of our teachers are exempt because of the nature of their work. Principals, district administrators, everyone right now that's sitting in this room that's a director, coordinator, assistant superintendent, whoever they might be, they're exempt. In other words, it doesn't matter how many hours a week they work. They get their salary. They don't get anything more than that. Everyone's time in the school district, except maintenance and custodial employees, is based on 37.5 hours a week. Maintenance and custodial employees work 40 hours a week. All right, so all these folks that are exempt that draw a salary, doesn't matter how much they work or how few hours or how many hours, they're paid that salary. All of our other employees, some of whom we refer to as salaried, classified, Lynn, what's the salaried non-exempt. Just because we call them that doesn't mean we can just pay them a salary. We have to pay them by the hour. So for every hour they work, they're entitled to an hour's pay. If they work over 40 hours in a week, we have to either pay them time and a half or give them an hour and a half off for every hour that they work. Then we have just straight out classified hourly employees. Every hour they work, they get paid. If they go over, they get time and a half, or they get an hour and a half off. So for all of those employees, it's sort of I guess a balanced system. If you work over, we have to compensate you. So if you work under, we require you to make up the time. Because actually on some of those snow days, particularly in the custodial area, we'll have hourly employees that are in working. So our stance with all of those who are non-exempt under Fair Labor Standards Act, even though we call those salaried employees, that group, which are generally clerks, bookkeepers, and secretaries, most other places wouldn't call them that. They would simply call them hourly employees. Calling them that makes it confusing. It's what's been done historically in the district. One of the reasons being so they could be paid over 12 months, because most of them don't work 12 as opposed to being paid over 9. So it's difficult. We've got some guidance out about that. We're glad to send. I think we've sent you all some summation. We can send you some more because people always have a question. But the way we handle that is the way we've handled it for the last 10 years. So there's been no change on our part in how we handle that. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
So I think so. So a salaried exempt employee would not be required to make up the time because it's just they're a salaried employee and exempt from overtime.
There are few, if any, employees that are salaried that work only 37 and a half hours a week. So we have, based on the few number of days we miss during the year, we just simply view it as compensation for all those times when you've worked 45, 50, 55 hours, whatever it might be. As you know, when you go by to school in the afternoon, there are a whole lot of cars still in that parking lot, well past their 7.5 hour day.
So a non-exempt employee that is salaried, they are given the opportunity to take the hours that they missed and apply them to either some other opportunity to make up those hours. Those are the ones who've written and said, I have to come in now and work. Because you're basically allowing them to make up the hours that they missed. So they
could have some, years ago we started, because we did bring in some custodians, we don't bring them all in. Normally they try to keep custodians where they have a certain number of comp hours in the bank and they can just draw them down. Okay. They can make it up some of them can make it up by coming in 30 minutes early, staying 30 minutes late, coming back at night. So if they come, for example, an aide in a school, if they've already worked their hours during the week and they come back to a PTA meeting at night as part of their job, now not if they have children in the school, but as part of their job, they're entitled to time and a half compensation for coming back for that meeting. So there are a lot of different ways they can earn that time.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. Any further questions? Hearing none, there is a motion on the floor to waive the requirement to make up 3 days, school days missed as a result of inclement weather. And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Item number 3.02, a revision of Board Policy FDC, naming of new facilities. Dr. Royster. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. And Mr. Webb may weigh in on this as well, but there have been a number of times over the last several years where there have been recommendations, usually coming from a school community, to name some area of a school facility, athletic field, something like that, in most cases to honor a person retiring. And your current policy provides that you cannot name a facility or portion thereof for an active employee. And on some occasions, the board has waived that policy. So it sort of puts the community and the board in an unusual and unique situation. You have, for example, a principal who's already given us a letter, who's already said they're going to retire. We've already accepted it. Their retirement will be effective June the 30th. And as part of recognizing their longstanding service to the community, for example, the school, SIC, PTA, Booster Club would like to name the Commons area after that principal. Well, when you think about that, the logical time to do that would be before the principal departs the school, sometime in the spring, right at the end of school, because generally speaking, they're going to have some sort of retirement gathering, recognize that person's service. It would be nice, if that's going to happen, if something's going to be named for them, to do it at that time. So several board members had expressed an interest in some modification to the policy that would allow for those sorts of circumstances. So what you have in front of you is a draft of a change to that policy, which would simply change it to read, has submitted his or her accepted resignation, and such recognition is within 6 months of his or her effective date of resignation, or they're no longer an employee. Keeping the last part, which is already in there. So, for example, we have a resignation for a principal who's retiring, effective June the 30th. Anytime 6 months on this side of that, without waiving the policy, if the board so chose to honor a request to name something, or a board member made that request to name something in honor of that individual, be able to do that without waiving policy. Did I omit anything, Mr. Webb?
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. Dr. Ball-O'Connor?
I would move approval.
So we have a motion to approve the revisions to board policy FDC.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Dr. Ball-O'Connor?
Just to say I appreciate this update. I had this happen in my community last year, and the parents and school community really wanted to honor a longstanding principal, and were not able to until he had already left. And so this is just an example of convenience for our communities, I think, but still honoring the idea that we don't name facilities or parts of them for somebody who still works for us. And I think it's a nice compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ball-O'Connor. Ms. Wells?
Just more of a reading thing. It seemed to me like we got this paragraph, that's the third paragraph, it's about persons wishing to submit requests and how they do it. Maybe should go before we say school facilities, buildings, gymnasium have to meet this criteria, because it seems like that criteria would be the last thing we would want to say, whether it's a school or some other building. So I don't know if that's kind of a thing that you can look at and adjust if you think it makes more sense from a readability. But it's just a suggestion for a change. That's it. I'm not making a motion. It's not substantive.
Any other questions?
Could you do that without a motion?
Mr. Sudduth?
In making a request, Dr. Royster, who can make the request? Is there a specific group or people that have to make the request? We usually have the principal make a request. We usually have the SIC make a request. We usually have the PTA make a request. Is there any particular standards that we go by?
It could. Any one of those could initiate it. Usually when we get one, we ask that all of those individuals weigh in on it. When I say individuals, each of those entities. So, for example, if it was to name an athletic field for a coach, we'd want certainly the principal to endorse that, and probably also the athletic booster club. If it's to name a part of the building, maybe the PTA, the SIC, as well as the principal, obviously if it's not in honor of the principal. So we generally like to have more input into that rather than less input.
Is there a minimum that we require? Let's say as a minimum, the principal.
There's a minimum, I mean, as far as established in your policy, yes, sir, but again, when they come to us, and we encourage that it be broader than just a minimum. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't bring one forward that only had a recommendation, but that might perhaps temper our recommendation about it.
We do not have a form for that, do we, Dr. Royster?
No, sir. Generally, they're submitted in a letter form, but no, we do not have a particular form.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sudduth. Any other questions? Hearing none, there is a motion on the floor to approve the revisions of policy FDC and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the revisions carry. And that concludes the administration section of our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. The next section of our agenda, buildings and grounds, I would turn over to Mr. Suddeth, please.
We come to item 4.01, facilities project report. Mr. Mills, I'll turn it over to you. If you have anything particular, Dr. Royster, you'd like to start.
No, sir.
All right.
No,
Mr.
sir.
Mills?
Good morning. Are there any questions I can answer?
Mr. Sailors?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is Terry's mic working? Okay. I don't hear you, Terry. Anyway, I was able to see Saturday when I was out at Roper Mountain some of the progress from the outside of what's going on with Harrison Hall. But I got a question for you. Have we replaced the roof on that building yet?
No, sir, we haven't. No, sir, we haven't, but it is in the scope of work and it is presently under contract.
Why are we doing the roof after the ground,
He knows it's not working. It's on.
I can see the green lights are on. It's evidently the control box. No big deal. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the water remediation against the front of the building has been completed, and the ground associated with that has been sloped in a manner to move the water away from the front of the building, which has been an ongoing problem. That I appreciate. Why are we doing the roof after that was accomplished, when clearly the dumpsters that are going to be put up there to collect the shingles are going to damage that work?
I can't answer that question. It is obviously a sequencing issue. I'm sorry, it's a sequencing issue. There was nothing intentional or unintentional about the process. It's just the way it's worked out.
I just know we spend a lot of time and money to get that water remediation addressed, and I'm just concerned that the roofing work is going to create damage in that area that we're going to have to go back and repair.
I will take note of that, and we'll take care to make that not happen. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Goodwin-Caldwell?
Mr. Mills, can you give me an update on the Carolina Courtyard project?
I spoke with the architect about this yesterday. They have assured me that we will have a bid package to put out on the 26th of this month, the week of the 26th of this month.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Mr. Meade?
Just to follow up on what Ms. Caldwell said, the completion date will be before school starts again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's certainly our intention. We should be able to get the project accomplished before August.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? If not, that's all that I have. I'll turn it back over to the chairperson, please. Oh, excuse me, Mrs. Leventis. Well,
No, you're right. I was going to do other business. My apologies, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
okay. Now, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Suddeth. Ms. Leventis Wells, you had something with other business?
I do, Madam Chair. I'm not sure what her name is now. Sherry Sweet, Sherry Sharp. No, I think it's Sherry Stokes. Congratulations on wedding. So we have a new person here.
Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Mrs. Stokes. Nice to see you. Good job. Any other business right now? Okay. I will accept a motion to adjourn with the first reminder that we will immediately call a special called meeting after that, so don't run away. Mr. Meeks?
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. And we are adjourned. Now, if we might call together the special called meeting, we wanted to have the opportunity for our community to be able to plan around and understand our actions as quickly as possible. So I would like to call this meeting to order and turn it over to Dr. Royster for, it's just Joy's head under there.
Did she hit her head?
That's why she's laughing, I guess.
It's all good.
Dr. Royster, would you like to explain the need for the special called meeting, sir?
I thought you had very eloquently and succinctly done that.
Okay.
So I don't know that I can add to that. But to your point, we wanted to be able to inform families as quickly as possible if the board approved of the waiver of the 3 days.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to waive the requirement to make up the 3 days missed as a result of inclement weather.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the item? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. And the motion carries. Mr. Mead? Would you like to have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second? All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. And we are adjourned. Thank you very much, and we will move to across the way for lunch. And then into A for the workshop on strategic ed planning. We have another one on the 20th. Just put your boots on.